Welcome back, and if this is your first time here, you're in the right place. This is a Scary Stories channel, and tonight we explore psychological and mind-bending horror told calmly for sleep. If you enjoy the stories, like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Get comfortable. Story 1. Everyone I know remembers a conversation I never had. I didn't mean to rent a place like this. Desperation has a way of sanding down your standards until all that's left is a splintered threshold between acceptable and uninhabitable. I just lost my job. Well, let go, as they politely called it. And my savings were bleeding out faster than I could patch the wounds. The city was expensive, and every decent apartment came with a landlord who wanted proof of income I no longer had. So when the listing popped up, quiet home in West Hollow, fully furnished, $400 a month, utilities included. I didn't ask why it was so cheap. I should have. The house stood at the end of a dead-end street in a neighborhood that had clearly seen better decades. Paint peeled from its clapboard siding like sunburnt skin, and a front porch sagged under its own weight. Still, the realtor, a woman named Mrs. Hargrove with too much rouge and too little eye contact, assured me the structure was sound. "Just needs a little love," she'd said, handing me a brass key that felt unnaturally cold. There was no lease, just a handshake and a month's rent in cash. I signed a receipt that looked like it had been printed from a 1998 Word document. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something faintly metallic, like old coins left in a damp drawer. The furniture was dated but serviceable, a floral print couch, a mahogany coffee table with water rings, a rotary phone on the hallway table that I assumed didn't work. The bedroom was on the second floor, tucked behind a narrow stairwell that creaked with every step. The bed was narrow, the mattress lumpy, but it was a roof. It was shelter. I told myself that was enough. The first night was quiet, too quiet. No traffic, no neighbors arguing through thin walls, not even the hum of a refrigerator, just the occasional groan of old wood settling. I slept fitfully, waking every few hours to the sensation of being watched. Each time I scanned a room, empty. The second night, it started. I was drifting off when I heard murmuring from downstairs, low, indistinct, but unmistakably human. Two voices, one deep, one higher-pitched, speaking in urgent tones. I sat up, heart hammering. Who could be here? Mrs. Hargrove hadn't mentioned another tenant. I crept to the top of the stairs, peering down into the dim hallway. Nothing. The front door was locked from the inside. All windows closed. I checked every room. Empty. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe my mind was playing tricks, weaving auditory hallucinations from the static of my anxiety. But the next morning, I found something odd. On the kitchen counter, next to the toaster, sat a single coffee mug. It wasn't there when I went to bed. I'm certain of it. I'd washed everything the day I moved in. No dishes, no cups. Yet here it was, still warm to the touch, a faint ring of brown liquid at the bottom. I didn't drink coffee. Never have. I called Mrs. Hargrove. She sounded distracted when she answered. "Oh, yes, the house is yours alone," she said. "Just you. Has someone been there?" Her voice hitched slightly. "No," I lied. "Just checking." That lie felt heavy all day. That evening, I decided to test it. I set up my phone on the staircase, pointed down the hall, recording audio only. If there were sounds, I'd have proof. I went to bed early, pretending to sleep. Around 2:17 a.m., the recordings picked it up again. Voices, this time clearer. I listened back with headphones, curled under the covers like a child. "He doesn't remember," the deeper voice said. "Give him time," the higher one replied. "It always comes back." "Not this time. He's different." A pause. "We'll have to remind him." The recording ended there. My hands shook. I rewound it 3 times. The voices weren't distorted, weren't muffled by distance. They sounded like they were standing right beside the phone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I went to see my friend Lena. We'd known each other since college. She lived downtown, worked for a nonprofit, kept her hair in neat braids, and always smelled like lavender. I needed normalcy. I needed someone who knew me, who could anchor me to reality. "Hey," I said, hugging her at her door. "You look awful," she said gently. "Come in." We sat on her couch. I told her about the house, the voices, the coffee cup. She listened quietly, her expression shifting from concern to something more complicated. "Oh, God," she said finally, "you really don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" She leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "The conversation last week. You called me, frantic. Said something was happening in that house. You told me about the voices. You said you'd spoken to your mother." My blood turned to ice. "My mother? She's been gone 10 years, Mark." I stared at her. "I know that. Of course I know that." "Then why did you tell me she came to you in the hallway? That she said, 'You have to remember what you did'?" "I never said that." Lena blinked. "You did. I wrote it down because it scared me. You were crying. You kept saying, 'She knows what I did.' And I asked you what you did, and you just hung up." I stood up. That didn't happen. But she went to her desk and pulled out a small notebook, flipped to a page dated 6 days ago. In her neat handwriting, Mark called. Hysterical. Said Mom visited. Mentioned what he did. Refused to explain. Worried. The date was before I'd even moved into the house. My stomach dropped. I wasn't even in West Hollow then. "You were," she said. "You told me you'd found this cheap place. Said it felt familiar." I left without another word. I called my brother next, Ben. We weren't close, but we kept in touch. Birthdays, holidays, occasional beers. "Hey," I said, forcing calm, "do you remember me calling you last week?" "Yeah," he said immediately. "You were freaking out about that old house. Said you'd heard Mom talking to you. I told you to get out of there, man. That place has a bad vibe." "I never called you." Silence. Then carefully, "Mark, you did. I have the call log. You left a voicemail, too, saying, 'I think I killed her.'" My breath caught. "What?" I didn't know what to say. I thought you meant figuratively, grief stuff, but you sounded unhinged. I hung up. Back at the house, I paced. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked hollow. Dark circles, pale skin, hair matted with sweat. I stared at it until it felt like it was staring back. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat at the kitchen table with a flashlight and notepad. If something was happening, I'd document it. I'd prove it was real, or prove I was losing my mind. At exactly 1:03 a.m., the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged. The lights, already dim, flickered once, then died. The emergency bulb above the stove cast long, trembling shadows. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The steps stopped outside the kitchen door. The knob turned. The door opened. No one was there, but the air, it changed. It carried the scent of jasmine, my mother's perfume. She always wore it on Sundays. "Mark," a voice whispered. Hers. Clear as day, I couldn't speak. "You promised you'd remember." "I don't know what you're talking about," I choked out. "You left me there." "Where?" "Mom, I was 16 when you died. I was at school." "You came back." No, I didn't." "You came back," she repeated, firmer now. "You opened the door. You let them in." I stood, backing into the counter. Who? Who did I let in?" The voice didn't answer. Instead, the hallway light flickered on by itself. Down the hall, the front door stood open. Moonlight spilled onto the rug. I ran upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and sat with my back against it until dawn. The next morning, I drove to the city archives. If my memories were failing, maybe records would help. I looked up the house on Elmwood Lane, West Hollow, built in 1923, owned by a family named Vey until 1989, then abandoned, then sold to a holding company, then nothing, until Mrs. Hargrove listed it. But I also looked up my own name, and there it was, a police report, dated 14 years ago, from this very address. Resident reported hearing voices. Mother found deceased in upstairs bedroom. No signs of forced entry. Son, Mark E., 16, interviewed. Claimed no memory of events. Ruled natural causes, though toxicology inconclusive. Natural causes? My mother died of a ruptured aneurysm at 42, in her sleep, in our apartment downtown. Not here. I showed the archivist the report. "This is wrong," I said. "My mom never lived here." The woman, older with wire-rimmed glasses, studied the file. That's odd. But the signature on the death certificate, that's your mother's maiden name, Eleanor Vey." Vey, the original owners. My head spun. Vey isn't her name. Her name was Riley. According to this, she was Eleanor Vey, married to Thomas Ellery. He died in 85. She lived here alone until 08. I left the archives shaking. I called Lena again. "What's my mom's full name?" "Eleanor Vey," she said without hesitation. "You told me she kept her maiden name after your dad died." "No," I whispered. "Her name was Riley. Eleanor Riley." "Mark, are you sure?" "Yes. But when I called Ben, he said the same thing. Eleanor Vey always was." I went back to the house, against every instinct. I needed to understand. In the attic, behind a loose wall panel I hadn't noticed before, I found a box, old photographs, newspaper clippings, a journal. The photos showed a woman who looked like my mother, but not quite. Same eyes, same smile, but her hair was darker, her face sharper. In one, she stood on the porch of this very house, arm around a boy who looked like me but younger. The date on the back, October 12th, 2007. The journal was hers. "I think Mark is changing," she wrote. "He looks at me like he doesn't know me anymore. He calls me Mom, but his voice is flat. Last night, he asked who his father was. He used to talk about Thomas all the time." Thomas. Not my father. My real father was Robert Ellery, died when I was 5. But in this version, Thomas Vey was my dad. And then I found the last entry. He came home tonight, calm, too calm. He said, "I know what you did." I told him I didn't understand. He went upstairs. I heard the door to the attic open. Then silence. When I checked, he was gone. The window was open. I think he jumped. But when I ran outside, there was no body, only footprints leading back inside. The date, November 3rd, 2008. The day my mother died. But according to this, I died that day. And yet, here I am, unless I'm not. Unless I'm something else. That night, I didn't resist the voices. I went downstairs when they called. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The front door stood open again, but beyond it wasn't the porch. It was a dark forest, trees swaying in a wind I couldn't feel. My mother stood there in the same blue dress she wore the day she died. Only now her eyes were hollow, black. "You stayed away too long," she said. "I didn't know," I said. "You knew. You just forgot." "What did I do?" I asked. "You opened the door," she said. "You let the wrong thing in. And it took you. Left something wearing your skin behind." I looked down at my hands. They looked like mine. But were they? "You've been living someone else's life," she said. "A patchwork of borrowed memories. But this house remembers the truth, and it's time to give you back." "Give me back what?" "Yourself." She reached for me. I didn't pull away. The moment her fingers touched my wrist, the world fractured. Memories flooded in, not mine, not the ones I'd lived with for years, but real ones, sharp, painful, true. I remember coming home from school that day, finding the house quiet, going upstairs, seeing the shadow in my mother's room. It wasn't human. It had too many limbs, too many eyes. It whispered in a voice that wasn't a voice, and I ran, but not outside. I ran into the attic. I found the old mirror, the one covered in dust, the one my mother said never to touch, and I stepped through, not to escape, to replace. The thing that followed me, it needed a vessel. So I gave it mine. I pushed it into my skin, into my bones, into my mind, and I became the ghost, the watcher, the forgotten boy in the walls, but the house wouldn't let me go. It kept me tethered, waiting for the day the imitation would crack. And when it did, when the borrowed memories began to fray, the house summoned everyone I knew to remind me of the truth. Because the truth is this: I never left West Hollow. I never got a job in the city. I never had friends named Lena or Ben. I died here, and the thing wearing my face, it's been trying to become real. But now I remember. And as my mother pulls me into the forest, the real world beyond the veil, I feel my body dissolve, not into death, but into return. Behind me, in the house, the front door slams shut, and somewhere inside, something that looks like me wakes up screaming, realizing it's alone with a life that isn't its own. And the voices, they start again. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. I can hear my house breathing. It started with the click. Not a loud sound, not the groan of old pipes or the pop of cooling wood that every century-old house makes as night falls. This was different, precise, biological, a soft, wet click, click, like a tongue detaching from the roof of a mouth. It came from the wall beside my bed. 2:17 a.m., always 2:17 a.m. I lay frozen, blanket pulled to my chin, listening to the silence after. The ordinary night sounds, the distant hum of the city, the sigh of wind in the eaves were still there, but beneath them now was a new layer, a slow, deep inhalation, a long, shuddering draw of air through unseen passages. The floorboards beneath my mattress vibrated faintly, a low thrumming resonance that traveled up my spine. Thrum, 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 like a heartbeat, but slower, deeper, too deep. I told myself it was the furnace, a new rhythmic fault in the ancient boiler in the basement. But the furnace hadn't worked in years. Management called it decommissioned, a polite word for dead. The next night, the click came earlier, 1:48 a.m., and the breath was louder, a slow, wet intake like bellows filling with thick fluid. The wall seemed to expand, just a fraction. The floral wallpaper, faded olive and rust, the same pattern as the sycamore house, stretched taut, the seams groaning softly. Then the exhale, a long sighing release of air that carried a scent, damp earth, ozone, and something else, coppery, like old blood. I pressed my ear to the wall, cold plaster. Then thrum, a vibration, stronger, closer, not in the wall, behind it, something vast, something alive. I moved out the next day, packed a single suitcase, left the lease unsigned on the kitchen counter, didn't look back as I walked down the cracked sidewalk, the suitcase wheels rattling over uneven concrete. The city air, thick with exhaust and fried food, felt clean, sterile, safe. I found a sublet. Oh, modern high-rise apartment downtown. Steel and glass, elevators, keycard access, no basements, no attics, no history, just clean lines and the constant reassuring drone of human activity. The first night was silent, blissfully, profoundly silent. No click, no thrum. Just the muffled thump of bass from the apartment above, the hiss of the radiator, the distant wail of a siren. I slept deeply, dreamlessly. I woke at dawn, feeling lighter, hopeful. Then I made coffee. Standing at the sleek minimalist counter, steam rising from the kettle, I looked out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city waking up. And I heard it, faint, muffled by double-paned glass, but unmistakable. Click. From inside, the wall beside the refrigerator, a pause, then the slow, wet inhalation. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The vibration traveled up the stainless steel counter, making the coffee mug rattle softly against the ceramic tile. I dropped the kettle. Scalding water splashed my ankles. I didn't feel the burn. I just stood there staring at the wall. The wallpaper was gone. Smooth, painted drywall. But the sound, the rhythm, it was the same. It had followed me. The high-rise apartment lasted 3 days. I moved again. A tiny studio above a 24-hour laundromat, constant noise, washing machines agitating, dryers tumbling, a wall of sound to drown out the silence, to drown out it. The first night, the rhythmic thump of the dryers was a comfort, white noise, a shield. At 3:02 a.m., the dryers cycled off. Silence crashed down. And beneath it, the click, louder, closer, not from the wall this time, from under the floor, a deep, wet click, 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 like massive valves opening. Then the breath, a long, shuddering inhalation that made the floorboards flex beneath my thin mattress. The vibration was stronger now, a physical pressure in my chest. The scent of damp earth and copper filled the small room, overpowering the smell of detergent. I pressed my ear to the floor. The wood was cold. Then, thrum! A deep, resonant pulse, not a heartbeat, a lungs, something enormous, buried deep, drawing breath. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the streetlights glow through the grimy glass, listening to the house breathe. In, the floor dips slightly. The walls sigh outward. Out. The floor rises. The walls contract. A faint sigh of air escaping unseen vents. It had a rhythm, a pattern, a cycle. I started timing it. Inhale, 17 seconds. Hold, 3 seconds. Exhale, 22 seconds. Pause, 5 seconds. 67 seconds per breath. 43 breaths per hour. 132 breaths per day. A living thing, buried beneath the city. And my apartments, my rooms, weren't just on it. They were part of it, like lice on a sleeping giant. The dreams started that week. Not of Elias, not of mirrors or reels, of roots, vast, pale, fibrous things, thicker than subway tunnels, pulsing with a slow, blue-tinged light, weaving through the bedrock beneath the city. They converged, twisted together, formed a colossal branching network, a nervous system, a circulatory system. At the center, deep, deep down, where the pressure would crush steel, where the temperature would melt lead, a chamber, not a cave, a thorax. Ribs of black basalt arched impossibly high, a diaphragm of layered shale and granite flexing with each ponderous breath, and suspended in the center, bathed in that same faint blue light, a heart, not muscle, not stone, a colossal spinning reel, pale, veined, glistening, eyes blinking slowly in the sprocket holes. The hum was deafening here, not a sound, a pressure, a fundamental frequency vibrating the very atoms of existence, and standing before the reel, impossibly small, impossibly calm, was Elias. He didn't look at the reel. He looked up, through miles of rock and root and resonating bone, straight at me. His lips moved. No sound reached me in the dream, but the words resonated in my bones, in roots, in the thrumming diaphragm. You hear it now? Good. Listen closer. It's not breathing around you, Cassian. He raised a hand, not in greeting, but in benediction. You're breathing with it. I woke, gasping, not for air, for silence. My hand was pressed flat against my chest, feeling my own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. But beneath it, fainter, slower, deeper, another rhythm. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Synchronized. My breath hitched. I took a deliberate inhale. The floor beneath me dipped. I exhaled. The floor rose. I wasn't just in the house. I was part of its breath. A tiny temporary lung in a vast slumbering body. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. I tore the apartment apart, ripped up the thin carpet, pried at the floorboards with a butter knife, scoured the walls with a flashlight, looking for seams, for vents, for anything. Nothing, just plaster, plywood, insulation. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere. It was the structure. The building was the organism, and I was inside it, like a cell, like a thought. I went to the roof, stood on the gravel surface, the city spread out below me, a glittering, indifferent nervous system of its own. Wind whipped my hair. The cold air burned my lungs. Silence, just the wind. I closed my eyes, listened. Beneath the wind, the traffic, the distant siren, there it was, faint, muffled by concrete and steel, but undeniable. Click. From the vent stack beside me, a deep, wet inhalation. The gravel beneath my feet vibrated. Thrum, thrum, thrum. I wasn't escaping. I was just moving to a different part of the lung. The final move was desperate. A cabin, deep in the woods, 2 hours north of the city. No electricity, no plumbing, just wood stove, well water, and silence. Real silence. The kind that rings in your ears. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Beth, handed me the keys. Place has been empty for years. Solid bones, though. Good bones. She said it with a smile, unaware of the chill that went down my spine. Good bones. I drove through the night, the headlights cutting tunnels through the black pines. The cabin was exactly as advertised. Small, sturdy, log walls, a stone chimney. Surrounded by towering firs, the air thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth. Peace. I stepped inside. The silence was profound, deep, a physical weight. I dropped my bag, sat on the rough-hewn wooden chair, closed my eyes, listened. No traffic, no sirens, no hum of appliances, just the wind in the pines, the creak of the cabin settling, and then a soft, wet click from the stone fireplace. A pause, then a slow, deep inhalation. The log walls groaned softly, expanding. The scent of damp earth and copper filled the small space. Thrum, thrum, thrum. The vibration traveled up the chair legs into my bones. It wasn't following me. It was the world, the cabin, the woods, the bedrock beneath the soil, all part of the same vast, slumbering thing. I walked to the fireplace, knelt, pressed my ear to the cold stone. The click was louder here, closer. Then the breath, a long, shuddering draw that seemed to pull the air from my own lungs, and beneath it, the hum, the same deep, resonant thrum. The blue light wasn't visible here, not yet, but I could feel it, pulsing in the stone, pulsing in the roots of the trees outside, pulsing in the marrow of my own bones. I sat by the cold hearth all night, not sleeping, listening, mapping the breath. Inhale, 17 seconds. Hold, 3 seconds. Exhale, 22 seconds. Pause, 5 seconds. 67 seconds. The same, always the same. At dawn, weak gray light filtering through the dusty window, I knew there was no escape, no silence to find. The breath wasn't in the houses. The houses were in the breath. The city was built on its bones. The woods grew from its skin. And I was just a flicker of consciousness in its vast, dreaming mind. A thought it was having, a memory it was replaying. The real, deep in the thorax of the world, spinning on, storing names, storing lives, storing me. As the first rays of sun touched the pine tops, I walked outside. The air was crisp, clean, smelling of frost and resin. I stood in the clearing, closed my eyes, took a deep breath. The forest held its breath with me. I exhaled. The trees sighed. Thrum, thrum, thrum. I opened my eyes, looked down at my hands. The cut on my palm, the one from the mug, was gone. In its place, etched into the skin, faint but clear, like a brand made of fine blue light, were 2 words. Breathe deep. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. I tilted my head back, opened my mouth, and took the deepest breath I could. The world breathed with me. The cabin groaned. The pines swayed. The earth vibrated. And deep below in the chamber of black basalt, the colossal reel spun faster. The eyes in the sprocket holes blinked all at once. The scariest part isn't hearing the house breathe. It's realizing, as the rhythm syncs with your own heartbeat, as the vibration becomes the only thing holding your bones together, that the breath you're taking isn't yours. It's the world's, and it's been waiting for you to finally inhale, to finally become part of the silence, to finally join the dream, to finally remember you were never the listener. You were always the song. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. Strangers keep apologizing to me for what's going to happen. It started with the barista. Not the usual sorry for the wait or sorry it's weak. This was different. Weighted. Final. I was at the grind. The too bright, too loud coffee shop near my office, waiting for my oat milk latte. The line snaked back to the door. Rain streaked the windows, turning the street outside into a watercolor smear of gray and neon. I was tired, bone-deep, soul-sore tired. From another night listening to the house breathe, another day trying to parse the whispers in the static, another hour staring at the etched words on my palm. breathe deep. My hands trembled slightly as I fumbled for my wallet. The barista, a guy with bright blue hair and a constellation of freckles across his nose, handed me the cup. His name tag read Jax. His smile was bright, professional. Then his eyes met mine. The smile didn't vanish. It fractured, like light hitting ice. His gaze didn't flicker with recognition. Not of me, Cassian Vale, regular Tuesday customer. It flickered with dread, a deep, intimate gut punch of sorrow. He looked at me the way you look at someone stepping onto thin ice you know is about to give way. He didn't say, "Here you go." He leaned forward just slightly, his voice dropping to a murmur barely audible over the espresso machine's hiss. "I'm so sorry. Not for the wait, not for the spill, just, I'm so sorry." My hand froze halfway to taking the cup. Sorry? For what? He didn't answer. He just held my gaze for a heartbeat longer, long enough for me to see the genuine, unvarnished pity in his eyes, and then slid the cup onto the counter, turned away, called the next order, his voice perfectly normal, cheerful even. "Large black for Mark." I took the latte. The cup felt cold in my trembling hand. Stress hallucination, sleep deprivation, paranoia. You're projecting. I walked to the small table by the window, sat down, stared at the rain. The words echoed, not as sound, but as a physical pressure in my chest. "I'm so sorry." The second time was the bus driver. Evening commute. Packed bus, hot and smelling of wet wool and exhaust. I fumbled with my transit card at the reader. Beep, error. Again. Beep, error. My fingers were slick with sweat. The line behind me sighed, shifted impatiently. The driver, an older woman with steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes sharp behind thick glasses, watched me in the rearview mirror, not with annoyance, with resignation. She reached out, not to take the card, but to gently tap the reader with a pen. Beep, valid. "Here," she said, her voice low, gravelly. She didn't look at me directly. Her eyes stayed on the road ahead, but her next words were aimed solely at me, carrying over the rumble of the engine and the murmur of passengers. "Don't fight it too hard, honey. It'll hurt less." Then she pulled the lever, the doors hissed shut, and the bus lurched forward. I stood frozen in the aisle, clutching the railing, the words searing into my mind. "Don't fight it too hard. It'll hurt less." What it? What was coming? Why was she warning me? Why did she know? A man in a rumpled suit standing beside me cleared his throat. He didn't look at me either, just stared straight ahead. His reflection in the rain-streaked window, pale and strained. "They always say that," he murmured, so softly I almost missed it. "Like it helps?" They? Who were they? The third apology came from a child, a little girl, maybe 5, with pigtails and a bright yellow raincoat, clutching a stuffed rabbit. She was standing with her mother outside the library, waiting for the crosswalk light to change. I approached, joining them on the curb. The light turned green. The mother stepped off the curb. The little girl didn't move. She turned her head, looked up at me. Her eyes were huge, dark, filled with a sorrow far too old for her face. She raised her stuffed rabbit slightly, as if offering it. "It's okay to be scared," she whispered, her voice clear as a bell in the sudden quiet of the street. "Mommy says the scary part is just the door closing." Then she turned and skipped after her mother, the yellow raincoat a bright spot against the gray sidewalk. The door closing. The phrase hooked into my brain, barbed and cold. Door, Sycamore House, basement door, Lab 3 door, the door to the thorax chamber in the dream. The door, closing. That night, I didn't try to sleep. I sat at my kitchen table in the high-rise apartment, the one that still breathed, though I'd stopped fighting it. The blue light, pulsing faintly in the corners of the room. The thrum, a constant undercurrent in my bones. I pulled out my journal, the one Dr. Thorne had suggested, the one I'd abandoned months ago. The pages were filled with frantic scribbles about voicemails, reflections, forgetting, Elias, the real. I turned to a fresh page. At the top, in shaky capitals, strangers, apologies, what's coming? I wrote down every detail, Jax's fractured smile, the bus driver's resigned warning, the little girl's ancient sorrow, the phrases, I'm so sorry. Don't fight it too hard. It'll hurt less. The scary part is just the door closing. I stared at the words. Patterns emerged, not in the words themselves. In the timing. Jax, Tuesday, 8:17 a.m. Bus driver, Tuesday, 6:03 p.m. Little girl, Wednesday, 4:48 p.m. The intervals, 9 hours, 46 minutes, 22 hours, 45 minutes. Not random. 9:46, 22, and 45. I added them. 32 hours, 31 minutes. 32:31. 3:23 but 17. 3:23 a.m., 17 minutes past 3. The time of the click. The time the house drew its deepest breath. The time the reel spun fastest. A convergence point. A deadline. I flipped back through the journal. The Sycamore House mantel clock, frozen at 3:17. The voicemails arriving. 3:47 p.m., 12 on 16 a.m., 11:59 p.m., all converging towards DR. 3:17, the first time I saw my reflection blink late. 3:07 a.m., the accident at Sycamore. And 5th, Dr. Thorne's file noted time of impact, 3:17 a.m. It wasn't just a time. It was a frequency, a resonant peak. The moment the veil was thinnest, the moment the door would close. A knock at the door shattered the silence, not a tentative tap, a firm, deliberate rap, rap, rap. 3 times. My blood turned to ice. No one came to my door, not at 9:37 p.m., not ever. I didn't move. The knocking came again. Rap, rap, rap. Louder, more insistent. I stood slowly, my chair scraping on the floor. The blue light in the corners flared brighter, pulsing in time with the thrum in the walls. I walked to the door, peered through the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, not Elias, a delivery guy, uniform, cap pulled low, holding a small plain cardboard box. He raised his hand, knocked again. Rap, rap, rap. Then, before I could speak, before I could ask who it was for, he leaned slightly towards the peephole. His voice, muffled by the door, was calm, resigned, heavy with the same sorrow I'd seen in Jax's eyes, heard in the bus driver's voice. Sign here, please, and I'm truly sorry. He slid a digital pad under the door. I didn't pick it up. Who's it from? My voice sounded thin, reedy. A pause. Then so quiet, I almost didn't hear it. From the other side. I didn't open the door. I waited. After a minute, I heard the soft shuffle of footsteps retreating down the hall. I picked up the pad. The screen was blank except for a single line of text, glowing faintly blue. Signature required, Cassian Vale. Beneath it, a stylus. My hand shook as I picked it up. I didn't want to sign, but my fingers moved anyway. As the stylus touched the screen, the blue light surged. The thrum deepened, becoming a physical vibration in my teeth. And the words appeared on the screen, not as I signed, but beneath my signature, written in a script that was unmistakably my own, shaky, desperate, The handwriting from the voicemail transcript. Don't sign. It's not a package. It's a summons. They're not apologizing for what they'll do. They're apologizing for what you'll do. When the door closes, when the reel stops, when you finally remember. Why? You're the anchor. Cassian, before. The pad went dark. The blue light in the room dimmed. The knocking didn't return. I left the pad on the floor, sat back at the table, stared at the journal. The pattern was undeniable now. The apologies weren't random acts of kindness. They were notifications, broadcasts like the voicemails, like the aging reflection, like the forgotten words, all signals, all converging on 3:23:17 a.m. The door closing, but what door and why were they sorry for me? The answer came at 1:17 a.m. I was pacing, the journal clutched in my hand, the thrum, a constant drumbeat in my skull, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, no message, just an image, a photograph of me, sitting at this very table right now. The angle was from the hallway. Through the crack in the door I'd left ajar after the delivery guy. Me, pale, hair disheveled, eyes wide with terror. The journal open on the table, and in the reflection of the dark window behind me, the blue light wasn't just in the corners. It filled the entire pane, and in the center of that blue light, indistinct but undeniable, stood a figure, Elias, watching, waiting. The phone buzzed again. Another image. Me, turning towards the phone, mouth slightly open in shock. Now, buzz, me. Standing up, chair pushed back, buzz, me, walking towards the bedroom. Door, buzz, the final image, not me. The bedroom door itself, closed, and on the smooth white paint, written in what looked like dark, wet fingerprints, my fingerprints, the words, "It's time to choose." I didn't go to the bedroom. I went to the window, looked down at the street 12 stories below. Rain had stopped. The city glittered, wet and cold. People moved like ants on the sidewalk. A woman in a red coat paused beneath a street light, looked up, not at the buildings, not at the sky, at my window. She raised her hand, not in greeting, in farewell, and her lips moved. I couldn't hear her, but I knew the words. "I'm so sorry." A man walking a dog stopped beside her. He looked up too, nodded once. "Don't fight it too hard." The little girl in the yellow raincoat appeared at the corner, holding her mother's hand. She looked up, smiled sadly. The scary part is just the door closing. They weren't strangers. They were witnesses, participants in the ritual, the final warning, the last chance. I turned from the window. The apartment was silent. The thrum had stopped. The blue light was gone. An absolute suffocating silence pressed in. The kind of silence that comes before a storm breaks, before a heart stops, before a door slams shut for the last time. I walked to the bedroom door. The words, "It's time to choose," glistened, still wet. I didn't wipe them away. I placed my palm over them, felt the cold, damp imprint of my own fingers, the cut on my palm, the one that had healed, leaving only the blue etching, breathed deep. Tingled, not with pain, with recognition. A memory, not of the cut itself, but of making it, not with a mug shard, with a knife, in the sycamore house, in the room with the mirror, Elias standing beside me, not threatening, guiding, his voice calm, steady, as I pressed the blade to my palm. The anchor isn't the ring, Cassian, it's the cut, the pain, the choice to bleed here, in this moment, to mark yourself as the tether, to say, "I am here, I am real, I am the point from which the echo returns. I had done it willingly to save them, Lena, Mira, Ben, Oliver, Alara. All the faces I'd forgotten, the names stored on the shelves in the blue light. I had carved the anchor into my flesh, to hold the door open, to keep the reel spinning, to give them time. But anchors erode, cuts, heal, and the door cannot stay open forever. The silence deepened. The air grew cold. 3:17 a.m. The click echoed, not from the wall, but from inside my own chest. A wet, final sound, like a valve sealing. The first breath of the new cycle wouldn't come, because this wasn't an inhale. This was the hold. The 3 seconds, the pause before the exhale that would close the door. I walked to the bed, sat down, picked up the journal, turned to the last page. My hand moved, not with my will, but with the deep, resonant thrum that was starting again, faintly, far away, deep in the bedrock. I wrote, "They're sorry because they know what I have to do. They're sorry because they know what I am. I'm not the victim. I'm not the witness. I'm the lock. The final seal. The one who turns the key. The reel can't stop spinning while the names are still echoing, while the fear is still raw, while the love is still real. So I have to make it stop. I have to step into the chamber. I have to become the silence. I have to close the door from the inside. It's the only way to keep them safe, to keep them stored, to keep them whole. Forgive me. Cassian, the last." I closed the journal, stood up, walked to the center of the room. The blue light returned, not pulsing, steady, filling the room with a soft, cold luminescence. The art floor vanished, not literally, but the sensation of wood beneath my feet dissolved, replaced by the cool, smooth texture of polished basalt. The walls of the apartment melted away, revealing the vast, arched chamber, black ribs soaring into darkness, the colossal diaphragm of shale and granite motionless, and in the center, suspended in the blue light, the reel, larger than a house, pale, glistening, veined with threads of pulsing blue light, eyes blinking slowly in the sprocket holes. Elias stood before it. He turned, not the calm, patient Elias of the dreams. This Elias was weeping. Tears traced paths through the dust on his cheeks. He held out his hand, not in invitation, in surrender. "You remembered," he whispered, his voice raw, stripped bare. The cut, the choice, the why. I looked at my hand, the blue etching. Breathe deep was glowing bright as a star. I knew what it meant now. Not inhale, accept, release, become. I walked forward. The humming wasn't loud. It was everywhere. The fabric of reality. The reel spun slower. The eyes in the sprocket holes blinked faster, desperate, hungry. Elias stepped aside. He didn't speak. He just watched, with sorrow, with gratitude, with love. I reached the base of the reel. It wasn't cold. It was warm, pulsing, alive. I placed my palm, the one with the glowing breathe deep, against the pale veined surface. It wasn't skin. It was memory. Lena's laugh, Mira's hug, Ben's hand in mine, Oliver's sleepy weight, Alara's tiny fingers gripping my thumb. All of them, safe, stored, whole. The reel shuddered. A deep, resonant groan vibrated through the chamber, through the bedrock, through the city above, through every house, every apartment, every cabin where the breath had ever been heard. The spinning slowed. The eyes blinked erratically. The blue light flickered. This was it. The ductor closing, not with a slam, With a sigh, a final gentle exhale, Elias's voice, the last sound in the universe, brushed against my mind. "Thank you, Cassian. Rest now." I closed my eyes and pressed. The scariest part isn't the strangers apologizing, it's realizing as the blue light fills your vision and the humming becomes your own breath that their sorrow isn't for you, it's for themselves. Because they know. They've all been here, they've all made the choice, they've all closed the door, and now it's your turn to become the silence, to become the anchor, to become the final, gentle click as the reel stops, as the names hold, as the world breathes on, safe for now. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. I'm a paramedic. The body I picked up spoke my name. The rain wasn't just falling. It was a solid, percussive thing, an endless drum solo on the roof of the ambulance. Each drop that hit the windshield was fat and heavy, exploding in a starburst of light from the street lamps before the wipers smeared it away. It was the kind of night that bled into morning without ever truly getting light, a perpetual state of 3 a.m. gloom. My name is Alex, and for the past 8 years, the soundtrack to my life has been a siren, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, and the weary sigh of my partner Sarah after a particularly nasty call. We work the night shift in a city that never really sleeps but often dies in its bed. You get used to it. You have to. The horror, the grief, the sheer sticky mess of human fragility. You build a callus over your soul, a thick, protective layer that allows you to intubate a dying man without your hands shaking and declare a stranger dead without your voice cracking. Tonight was a slow bleed, a fender bender, a drunk who'd fallen down a flight of stairs, a kid with a febrile seizure, the usual smorgasbord of urban misery. We were parked in our designated spot outside the ER. The smell of antiseptic wipes and stale coffee thickened the cab. Sarah was scrolling through her phone, the blue light making her face look hollow. I was staring out at the rain, letting the rhythmic squeak of the wipers lull me into a state of semi-consciousness. Then the radio crackled, a burst of static followed by the calm, disembodied voice of dispatch. Unit 73, respond to a wellness check. 1432 Blackwood Avenue. Repeat, 1432 Blackwood. Police are on scene. No answer at the door. Neighbor reports a foul odor. A wellness check with a foul odor. That was code. It meant we weren't going to be saving anyone. We were going to be dealing with the aftermath, the lonely, quiet end that nobody wants to think about. I keyed the mic. 73 responding. Sarah sighed, pocketing her phone. Blackwood Avenue? Isn't that out by the old mill district? The very same, I said, putting the ambulance in gear. The part of town the city forgot to pave. The drive was quiet. The rain intensified, and the world outside became a blurry watercolor of bleeding reds and yellows. Blackwood Avenue was a street of ghosts. The houses were old Victorians, most of them in a state of terminal decline, their paint peeling like sunburnt skin, their porches sagging like the jaws of old men. 1432 was the worst of the lot. It was set back from the road, partially consumed by an overgrown garden of weeds and thorny bushes that scraped against the side of the ambulance as I pulled into the driveway. A single police cruiser was parked at the curb, its lights off, making it look like an abandoned wreck. Two officers, a rookie named Evans and a veteran I recognized as Miller, met us on the porch. The smell hit us as soon as we stepped out of the cab. It was sweet and cloying, the unmistakable scent of decay. It's a smell you never forget and one that clings to the inside of your nostrils for hours. "He's in the living room," Miller said, his face impassive. "Looks like he's been there a while. Name's Arthur Pendleton. Neighbor hadn't seen him in about a week." We donned our gloves and masks, the thin layer of latex and paper, a pathetic shield against the reality we were about to face. The front door was already ajar, splintered around the lock where the police had forced it open. Inside, the house was a time capsule. Dust motes danced in the beams of our flashlights, illuminating furniture draped in white sheets, yellowed wallpaper peeling at the seams, and stacks of old newspapers that reached the ceiling. It was the home of a man who had been alone for a very, very long time. He was in an armchair, facing a dead television. He was old, skeletal thin, his skin the color of old parchment and stretched tight over his bones. His eyes were closed and his mouth was slightly open, as if he had been in the middle of a sigh when his life had simply stopped. There were no signs of trauma, no indication of a struggle, just a quiet, lonely exit. It was a scene we'd witnessed 100 times before. The forgotten ones, the people who die and the world doesn't notice for a week. We did our work, the grim, necessary protocol. I checked for a pulse I knew I wouldn't find. Sarah listened for breath sounds that weren't there. We hooked him up to the monitor, a formality for the paperwork, and watched the flat, unwavering line march across the screen. Time of death was impossible to determine. We just wrote down the time we'd found him. "All right," I said, my voice muffled by the mask. "Let's get him on the gurney." We brought in the body bag and the gurney. It was always the worst part. The transition from a person, a former life, into cargo. We positioned ourselves on either side of the armchair. Sarah took his shoulders and I took his legs. The body was stiff, rigor mortis having come and gone, leaving a strange plastic-like flexibility in the limbs. "On 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. We lifted. He was lighter than he looked, almost bird-like. As we maneuvered him out of the chair, his head lolled to the side, turning towards me. His thin, papery eyelids fluttered. I froze. It was a common phenomenon, a result of shifting post-mortem gases or muscle relaxation. I'd seen it before, but it was always unnerving. "You good?" Sarah asked, her voice strained from the weight. "Yeah," I grunted. "Just weird angle." We lowered him into the body bag. He was lying on his back, his face now pointing up at the ceiling. I reached for the zipper, my hand hovering over his chest. That's when it happened. His lips, dry and cracked like a sun-baked riverbed, pulled back from his teeth. A soft, airy sound escaped, a puff of putrid air that carried a single, impossible word. "Alex." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even a full-voiced whisper. It was a rasp, a dry rustle of dead leaves, the sound of a voice that hadn't been used in a long, long time. But it was my name, unmistakably my name. My blood turned to ice water. Every hair on my arm stood on end. My breath caught in my throat, a sharp, painful hitch. I stared down at the dead man, at his still, silent mouth. Had I imagined it? The stress, the long night, the oppressive atmosphere of the house. My mind had to be playing tricks on me. "What was that?" Sarah's voice cut through my paralysis. My head snapped up. I looked at her, my eyes wide above my mask. "You heard that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. She was staring at the body, her face pale. I don't know. It sounded like the wind. But she didn't look convinced. She looked as scared as I felt. I looked back down at Arthur Pendleton. His face was placid again, a mosque of serene decay. There was no sign that he had just shattered my understanding of reality. My training, my experience, everything I knew about life and death told me it was impossible. Dead men don't speak, and they certainly don't know your name. I zipped the bag. The sound of the zipper was unnaturally loud in the silent house, a final, definitive act. But nothing felt final. It felt like the beginning of something terrible. The trip to the morgue was the longest 10 minutes of my life. I drove, my hands clenched so tightly on the steering wheel that my knuckles were white. I kept my eyes glued to the road, but my mind was in the back of the ambulance with the black bag strapped to the gurney. Every bump, every turn sent a fresh jolt of fear through me. Was he moving back there? Was he trying to sit up? I could feel the weight of his presence, a cold, heavy thing that had nothing to do with his physical body. Sarah was silent in the passenger seat, staring out her window. I didn't know if she was trying to convince herself that she hadn't heard what I had, or if she was just too scared to talk about it. We had an unspoken rule. We didn't take the horrors of the job home with us. We saw things that would break most people, and we compartmentalized. We had to. But this wasn't the kind of horror you could put in a box. This felt like it had followed us out of the house. At the hospital, we bypassed the bustling ER and went straight to the morgue entrance in the basement. The air down there was always cold, with the clean, chemical smell of disinfectant failing to mask a deeper, earthier odor. The attendant, a burly, perpetually bored man named Frank, met us at the door. "Got another one for me?" he asked, not looking up from his crossword puzzle. "Yeah, Frank. DOA from Blackwood Avenue," Sarah said, her voice a little too high. We wheeled the gurney in. The room was sterile and bright, all stainless steel and white tile. It was a place designed to be devoid of emotion, a clean, efficient processing center for the dead. But tonight, it felt like the most terrifying place on earth. As we transferred the bag from our gurney to one of Frank's tables, I could have sworn I felt a faint vibration from inside, a subtle shifting of weight. I let go so quickly my hand recoiled as if I'd been burned. Frank tagged the bag with the name Arthur Pendleton. Then he wheeled him over to one of the refrigerated units, a wall of identical steel doors. He pulled one open, a cloud of cold vapor billowing out. With a practiced heave, he slid the body inside. The door closed with a heavy metallic thud, and the lock clicked into place. It was over. He was gone. But as we walked back to the ambulance, I felt a cold draft on the back of my neck, and I heard it again, as clear as if someone were standing right behind me, a faint, sibilant whisper on the edge of my hearing. "Alex." I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hallway was empty. Sarah was already climbing into the driver's side of the ambulance. She hadn't heard it. This time, it was just for me. The rest of the shift passed in a haze. We had 2 more calls, a drug overdose and a car accident, but I moved through them like an automaton. My body was there, my hands were performing to familiar tasks, but my mind was miles away, trapped in that dusty house, replaying that impossible moment over and over again. I kept telling myself it was a hallucination, a product of exhaustion and a morbid scene. But I couldn't shake the feeling, the cold, primal certainty that something had latched onto me. Something from that old house, something that wore the face of Arthur Pendleton. When our shift finally ended, the sun was a weak, gray smear on the horizon. I drove home in a stupor, the city still sleeping around me. My apartment, usually a sanctuary from the chaos of my job, felt alien and threatening. The familiar creaks of the old building sounded like footsteps. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a low, guttural moan. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my ears straining for any sound. Every shadow in the corner of my room seemed to coalesce into the shape of a tall, thin man. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his cracked lips, his papery skin, and I heard my name, whispered in that dry, dead voice. The next few days were a waking nightmare. At work, I became jumpy and irritable. Every DOA call sent a spike of adrenaline and fear through my system. I found myself hesitating before touching the bodies, my hands trembling. Sarah noticed. "You've been on edge ever since that call on Blackwood," she said one night as we sat in the ambulance. "What's going on, Alex?" I wanted to tell her. I wanted to tell her that I was hearing things, that I felt like I was being watched, that I was convinced the dead man we'd picked up was haunting me. But how could I? She'd think I was losing my mind. She'd report me to our supervisor, and I'd be on administrative leave, forced into therapy. So I lied. "Just tired," I mumbled. "Haven't been sleeping well." She didn't press, but I could see the concern in her eyes. The wall of professional detachment between us was cracking. At home, things escalated. It started with small things. Objects would be slightly out of place. My keys on the wrong side of the table, a book I was reading open to a different page. Then came the sounds. The whispering became more frequent, no longer just on the edge of my hearing, but clear, distinct, and always, always my name. I started hearing footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment door, only to find no one there when I looked through the peephole. One night, I was in the bathroom washing my face. When I looked up into the mirror, he was there. For a split second, standing behind me was the gaunt figure of Arthur Pendleton. He was just a reflection, translucent and wavering, but his eyes were open, and they were staring right at me. I cried out and stumbled back, splashing water all over the floor. By the time I looked again, he was gone. That was when the denial finally shattered. This wasn't stress. This wasn't my imagination. This was real. I was being haunted. My rational mind, the part of me that was a paramedic, that dealt in facts and evidence, screamed for an explanation. I had to know who Arthur Pendleton was. What had he been in life that had allowed him to cling to me so tenaciously in death? Breaking protocol, I used my access to the hospital's record system. I pulled up the file from our call. Arthur Pendleton, age 87, no listed next of kin, no emergency contacts. He was a ghost even before he died. I dug deeper, cross-referencing his name and address in public records databases. I spent hours scrolling through digitized archives of old newspapers, property deeds, census records, and then I found it. A small article from a local newspaper dated 1958. The headline read, "Local Man Claims Contact with the Other Side." The article was about a young Arthur Pendleton who had caused a stir in the community by claiming to be a medium. He held seances in his house on Blackwood Avenue, claiming he could speak to the dead. He also spoke of a theory he called solic transference, the idea that a consciousness at the moment of death could imprint itself onto a receptive living person, a vessel, and continue to experience the world through them. The article dismissed him as a charlatan and a crank. But as I read his words, a cold dread washed over me. He wasn't just a forgotten old man. He was a man who had spent his life obsessed with cheating death. And I had been the first person to touch him when he finally succeeded. The knowledge didn't bring me peace. It brought terror. I wasn't just being haunted by a ghost. I was being targeted by a consciousness that wanted to use me. The activity in my apartment intensified dramatically. The whispers were now full sentences, fragmented and nonsensical, but in that same dry, rasping voice. So cold, let me in. I see with your eyes. One evening, I was heating up soup on the stove. I turned my back for a moment to grab a bowl, and when I turned back, every cabinet and drawer in my kitchen was wide open. Another night, I woke up to find all the faucets in my apartment turned on, the sound of rushing water filling the silence. The most terrifying incident happened with my television. I was watching a movie when the screen suddenly went to static. A face began to form in the swirling black and white dots. It was his face, Arthur Pendleton's face. His mouth opened, and a distorted electronic version of my own voice came out of the speakers. "Help me," it said in my voice. "He's trying to get in." I was losing my grip. I was afraid to be in my own home. I was afraid to go to sleep. My work suffered. I made a mistake on a call, gave the wrong dosage of a drug. Sarah caught it and corrected me, saving me from a potentially fatal error. That night, she cornered me in the hospital parking lot. "That's it, Alex," she said, her arms crossed. "I'm not letting you brush this off anymore. You almost killed someone tonight. You're not just tired, you're falling apart. Talk to me now." The dam broke. I told her everything, about the whisper in the dead man's house, about hearing my name in the morgue, about the reflection in the mirror, the whispers, the television. I told her about the old newspaper article and Arthur Pendleton's insane theory. I expected her to recoil, to tell me I was crazy. But she just listened, her expression growing more and more grim. When I was finished, she was silent for a long time. "I heard it too, you know," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. "In the house. I heard him say your name. I've been trying to convince myself I didn't, but I did." A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost brought me to my knees. I wasn't crazy. Someone else knew. I wasn't alone in this. But our shared knowledge made the situation infinitely more real and therefore more dangerous. The haunting was no longer just my problem. It was ours, and it was getting stronger. The next shift, we were responding to a call when the radio in the cab crackled. It was dispatch, but the voice was distorted, overlaid with a dry, rasping sound. "Unit 73, Alex, where are you going?" Sarah and I looked at each other, our faces ashen. Even dispatch called back, asking if we had a problem with our radio. Arthur was no longer confined to my apartment. He was following me, bleeding into the technology I used every day, using my own voice to taunt me. He was getting closer, trying to push me out and take my place. We knew we couldn't go to the police or our supervisors. They would put us on psych leave so fast our heads would spin. we were on our own. We spent our days off in the library, researching the occult, spiritualism, anything we could find on Sulik transference or consciousness imprinting. Most of it was nonsense, but we found recurring themes, fragmented bits of lore about entities that anchor themselves to the living. The consensus was grim. The longer the connection lasted, the stronger the entity became, and the weaker the host's own consciousness grew. Eventually, the host would be pushed out entirely, their body becoming a vessel for the invading spirit. We realized we had to do something drastic. We had to go back to where it all started. We had to go back to 1432 Blackwood Avenue. The house was even more decrepit than I remembered. A yellow "No Trespassing" sign had been slapped on the door, but the police tape was torn and fluttering in the wind. We broke in through a side window, the sound of shattering glass echoing in the silent street. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The dust was thicker, the silence heavier. It felt like the house was holding its breath, waiting for us. We had a vague plan, cobbled together from the pseudo-religious texts we'd found. We needed to perform a kind of severance, a ritual to break Arthur's connection to me. We brought salt, candles, and an old iron railroad spike we'd found, which one of the books claimed could pin down a restless spirit. It felt absurd, like we were LARPing a horror movie, but we were desperate. We went to the living room, to the armchair where he had died. As I stepped into the room, the temperature dropped precipitously. The air grew thick and heavy, and an overwhelming sense of despair washed over me. This was his place. This was the heart of his power. "I can feel him," I whispered to Sarah, my teeth chattering. "I know," she said, her voice tight with fear. "Let's just do this and get out." She began to pour a circle of salt around the armchair while I set up the candles. As I lit the first one, a wind swept through the sealed room, extinguishing the flame. I tried again. This time all the candles flared up at once, their flames burning unnaturally tall and bright. And then the whispers started, not just my name anymore, a cacophony of voices, swirling around the room, echoing from the walls. They were the voices of the dead, the spirits Arthur had claimed to speak to, all trapped here with him. "He is one of us now," a woman's voice hissed. "You cannot take him," a man's voice boomed. The house began to shake. The stacks of newspapers toppled over, sending up clouds of dust. The white sheets on the furniture were ripped off by an unseen force. In the center of the room, above the armchair, the air began to shimmer and coalesce. The form of Arthur Pendleton began to take shape, not as a translucent ghost, but as a writhing, multi-limbed creature made of shadow and dust, his face contorted in a silent scream. "Alex!" Sarah yelled, grabbing my arm. "The spike! Do it now!" I held the iron spike in my trembling hand. The book had said I needed to drive it into the source of the haunting. I looked at the swirling vortex of darkness above the chair. That was him. That was the thing that had been tormenting me. I took a step forward, and the entity focused on me. Its shadowy form lunged, not at my body, but at my mind. I felt a crushing pressure in my skull, a wave of cold, desolate energy that tried to scour my own thoughts away. I saw flashes of Arthur's life. A lonely boy in a big, empty house. A young man mocked for his beliefs. An old man sitting in a chair, waiting for death, not with fear, but with anticipation, with a plan. He was trying to show me his loneliness, his pain, trying to make me understand, to make me give in. He flooded my mind with his own memories, And in that moment, I understood his desperate, pathetic plan. He didn't want to just possess me. He wanted me to become him, to trade my life for his willingly. "No," I gasped, stumbling back. "Don't listen to him, Alex," Sarah shouted. "Fight him." I knew I couldn't overpower him. He was too strong here. But as his consciousness pressed in on mine, I felt something else. I felt his fear. He was terrified of oblivion, terrified of being alone in the dark. That was his weakness. I stopped fighting him directly. Instead of pushing back, I focused my mind. I thought about my own life. I thought about the first time I saved someone, a little girl who had been pulled from a swimming pool, her skin blue. I remembered the feeling of her heart starting to beat again under my hands. I thought about Sarah, the bond we shared, the countless hours we'd spent together, the unspoken trust between us. I thought about the sun on my face, the taste of coffee, the sound of rain on a window pane when I was safe in my bed. I flooded our shared mental space with the vibrancy, the warmth, the messy, beautiful chaos of being alive. The shadowy form recoiled, screeching, a sound that was both in the room and inside my head. My life, my connections, my will to live, it was like poison to him. "You are nothing but a memory," I shouted, my voice raw. "You are dead, and you will stay that way." I surged forward, pushing through the wall of cold, and plunged the iron spike deep into the cushions of the armchair, into the very spot where his body had sat. The moment the spike sank into the fabric, the entity let out a final, agonizing shriek that shattered the remaining windows in the house. The shadowy form imploded, collapsing in on itself, and the room was plunged into an abrupt, deafening silence. The candles went out. The shaking stopped. The oppressive cold vanished, replaced by the natural musty chill of the abandoned house. We stood there panting in the near darkness, surrounded by salt and shattered glass. It was over. I could feel it. The presence in my mind was gone. The cold spot on my soul had vanished. I was alone in my own head for the first time in weeks. We didn't stay to clean up. We scrambled out the broken window and ran, not stopping until we were back in the car, speeding away from Blackwood Avenue. We never spoke of what happened in that house. We didn't need to. We had faced the impossible together, and we had survived. I left my job a month later. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't walk into a stranger's house, not knowing what lingered there. I couldn't touch a dead body without a flicker of that old fear returning, the fear that it might open its eyes, that it might know my name. Sarah stayed on. She was stronger than me. We're still friends, but there's a distance between us now, a shared trauma that we can't ever truly move past. I moved to a new city, got a new job, a quiet, boring office job. I tried to build a new life, to forget the rasping voice and the face and the static. Most days I succeed, but sometimes, on a quiet night, when the wind is blowing just right, I'll hear a sound, a dry rustle of leaves that sounds almost like a whisper. And in those moments, I freeze and I listen, and I pray that I don't hear my name. I broke the connection, I'm sure of it, but I also know that I was a vessel once, and some part of me will always be afraid that I left the door open just a crack, and that somewhere, in the cold and the dark, Arthur Pendleton is still waiting, still whispering, still hoping that one day I'll let him back in. That brings this story to a close. Let's carry on to the next one. Every time the phone rings, a different reality ends. The phone started ringing on a Tuesday, not my cell. The landline, the heavy cream-colored rotary relic bolted to the kitchen wall of the apartment I'd rented after Clara left. Finch, the landlord, had insisted it stay. "Emergency line," he'd wheezed, tapping the dusty receiver. "Cuts out sometimes. Don't mind the static." I'd almost refused the place over it, a cramped studio above Mrs. Gable's laundromat, smelling perpetually of wet wool and loneliness, but the rent was $375 a month. My savings were gone. I took it. The phone sat silent for 3 weeks, a dead weight on the wall. Then, Tuesday, I was washing a single coffee mug, the lukewarm water from the tap doing little to cut the grease. The ring shattered the quiet, a harsh, mechanical brrring burn that echoed off the tile like a fire alarm. I jumped, nearly dropping the mug. No one called this number, ever. I wiped my hands on a threadbare towel, heart thudding against my ribs. The ring cut off on the 5th shrill cry. Silence rushed back in, thick and heavy. I exhaled. Static, like Finch said. Just old wires. I was drying the mug when it rang again. Same brutal, insistent sound. This time I snatched the receiver, pressing it to my ear before I could think. Hello? Silence. Not dead air. A living, breathing silence. Then a voice. My own voice, but younger, softer, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Eli? You forgot your lunch again, silly. I packed your favorite turkey and avocado on rye. It's in the fridge." A pause, a sound like wind chimes. "Clara's already left for her appointment. She said to tell you she loves you and happy anniversary." My blood turned to ice. Clara left 18 months ago. We never had an anniversary celebration. I'd forgotten our actual date years before she walked out. "Who is this?" I whispered, my knuckles white on the receiver. The line went dead. Not a click. A sudden, absolute void of sound. I slammed the phone down. My hands were shaking. I walked to the tiny fridge, yanked it open. There, on the top shelf, sat a brown paper bag, my name written on it in Clara's looping script. I tore it open. Turkey and avocado on rye. The bread was fresh, the avocado perfectly ripe. I hadn't bought groceries in days. I threw the sandwich in the trash, bile rising in my throat. Coincidence? A cruel joke? Finch messing with me? I called him, no answer. Voicemail full. That night, I slept on the couch, the phone cord wrapped around my wrist like a lifeline. I needed to hear it coming. At 2:17 a.m., it rang. I grabbed it before the second ring. "Hello?" Silence. Then the sound of rain. Gentle, steady rain on a roof. And Clara's voice, clear as a bell, humming our song, the one from our first date, the one she'd stopped humming after the miscarriage. My breath caught. "Clara?" The humming stopped. Her voice, thick with sleep and warmth. Eli, is the storm keeping you up? Come back to bed. The baby's asleep. She didn't even wake when the thunder cracked." A soft chuckle. Our little storm chaser. I dropped the receiver. It clattered against the wall, the cord yanking taut. The line stayed open. I heard her sigh, the rustle of sheets, the soft pad of bare feet on hardwood. "Eli? Honey, you okay?" Then, faintly, the sound of a baby cooing, a real living, breathing baby, a baby Clara and I never had. The line went dead. I stood frozen in the dark kitchen, the receiver swinging like a pendulum. My reflection in the black window showed a man with hollow eyes and a face I barely recognized. I hadn't dreamed of that baby, the one we lost at 12 weeks, in years. The grief was a scar, not an open wound, until now. I ripped the phone cord from the wall the next morning, tossed a heavy receiver into the back of the closet, buried it under old winter coats. The silence was blissful for 3 days. Then, Thursday night, the ringing started again, not from the closet, from inside the walls. A muffled, insistent brrring, brrring, vibrating through the plaster, the floorboards, my teeth. I tore the coats aside. The receiver was gone. Only the severed cord dangled from the wall jack, sparking faintly. The ringing grew louder, deeper, seeming to come from the apartment below, from the street outside, from the far air. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside my skull. I ran downstairs, bursting into Mrs. Gable's laundromat. The dryers were still. The fluorescent lights hummed. Mrs. Gable looked up from her crossword, blinking behind thick glasses. "Eli, you all right, hon? You look like you seen a ghost." "The phone," I gasped. "The ringing. Can't you hear it?" She frowned. "Phone's been quiet all night. You feeling okay? You're white as a sheet?" The ringing stopped, abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening. I mumbled an apology and fled back. Upstairs, the severed cord hung innocently. No sparks, no sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. It wasn't the phone. It was me. The breaks in reality were getting wider. The static wasn't in the wires. It was in my head. I called Dr. Evans the next morning, got the first available appointment, 2 days away. Friday night, the ringing started again, not from the walls, from my pocket. I was brushing my teeth, the bathroom mirror fogged, when the vibration shocked me. My cell phone was dead on the charger, but in my jeans pocket, empty when I changed, was a small, smooth object. A phone, not a cell. A tiny ivory-colored rotary receiver, impossibly warm. It rang. Burring, 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 burring. I dropped it into the sink. It kept ringing, the sound sharp, metallic, bouncing off the porcelain. I turned on the tap, drowning it out. The water ran rusty brown for a moment, then cleared. When I shut it off, the phone was gone. But on the steam-fogged mirror, written in condensation, were words in my own hand. "Answer. She's waiting." Saturday, rain lashed the windows. I was making tea, trying to ignore the phantom vibration in my thigh, when the phone rang from the closet. I stood frozen, kettle forgotten, steam burning my hand. It rang 5 times, 6, 7. On the 8th ring, I walked to the closet, pulled aside the coats. The receiver hung there, impossibly, from a hook on the inside door, cord snaking down into the darkness of the closet floor, dry, clean, no sign of the severed end. I picked it up, cold, heavy. I pressed it to my ear. Silence. Then the smell. Not rain. Lilacs. Clara's favorite. Her voice, close, intimate, like she was lying beside me in a dark room. "You always hated the lilacs by the porch, remember? Said they smelled like funeral homes, but I planted them anyway. For Mom." A pause. The sound of a page turning. "The contractors start Monday. They'll rip them out. Build the new deck. You'll be glad." Her voice dropped, tender. "Eli, are you crying? It's just flowers. We never had a porch. We never had a house. We lived in a 3rd-floor walk-up until the end." My throat closed. "Clara, we don't have a porch." A soft laugh, warm and familiar. "Silly, of course we do. You built it yourself. The one with the swing where we sat when the baby took her first steps." Her voice sharpened, confused. "Eli, where are you? You sound far away." The line filled with static, a roar like a distant waterfall. Through it, Clara's voice, strained. Remember the hospital, the snow? You held my hand so tight. You promised. The static swallowed her words, then, clear as a knife, don't let go. The line died. I lowered the receiver. My cheeks were wet. I hadn't realized I was crying. I looked down. My hands weren't empty. Clutched in my right hand was a single perfect lilac bloom. Purple. Real. The scent filled the small kitchen. I dropped it. It vanished before it hit the floor. Only the smell remained. Sunday, I called in sick. Didn't shower. Didn't eat. Sat on the couch, staring at the wall phone jack. The silence was a living thing, coiled tight in my chest. At 3:03 p.m., the ringing started. Not from one place, from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the ceiling, my own bones, a chorus of mechanical shrieks. I pressed my palms over my ears, rocking. Make it stop. Make it stop. The ringing shifted pitch, became a single deafening tone. Then silence. Utter, absolute silence. Even the hum of the city outside vanished. I lifted my head. The apartment was empty. Not just quiet. Empty. The couch was gone. The coffee table. The lamp. The window looked out on a featureless gray fog. I was sitting on bare floorboards. The only sound was my own ragged breathing, and the phone. The receiver lay in my lap. It hadn't rung this time. It was just there. I picked it up. No dial tone. Just that same living silence. I waited. Nothing. I hung up. The apartment snapped back. Couch, table, window, showing the rain-slicked street. Normal. But the silence in my head remained, thick, waiting, and on the coffee table, where no note had been before, lay a single sheet of paper, my handwriting jagged, terrified. She's gone. I let go. Dr. Evans' office was all beige carpet and soothing abstract art. She listened, her pen hovering over her notepad as I told her about the phone, the lilacs, the empty apartment, the note. Her expression didn't change. Dissociative episodes, she said gently, very common after traumatic loss. Your mind is constructing narratives to process the grief you never fully addressed. The phone, it's a symbol, a connection you crave. She prescribed a new antidepressant, stronger. And Eli? Get rid of the landline, have Finch remove it, today. Finch came that afternoon, grumbling about short notice. He pried the phone jack from the wall, wires snaking out like roots. Told you it was faulty, he muttered, stuffing the receiver and cord into a burlap sack. Static'll eat your brain. He left the hole in the wall patched with duct tape. I watched him go, relief washing over me. It was over, just wires, just grief. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No ringing, no static, just the familiar thump-thump of Mrs. Gable's dryers downstairs. I woke at dawn to sunlight streaming through the window. Peaceful. I made coffee, sat at the small table. Normal. Then the coffee cup trembled in my hand. Not my hand. The cup. As if the table was vibrating. The sunlight dimmed, not clouds. The light itself was leaching away, turning the room gray, flat, two-dimensional. The thumping dryers slowed, stopped. Silence pressed in. From the patched hole in the wall, a single, muffled brrring echoed. Then another, louder, insistent. I stood backing away from the table. The coffee cup shattered on the floor, but the sound was dull, lifeless. The patch of duct tape on the wall bulged, ripped. The severed end of the phone cord snaked out, writhing like a blind worm, the receiver dangling. It rang. Brrrring, brrrring. I ran to the door, locked. The key turned in my hand, but the knob wouldn't budge. I yanked the curtain shut. The room plunged into twilight. The ringing filled it, vibrating the air, making my teeth ache. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside me, in my bones, in my blood. I have to answer. The thought wasn't mine. It was a command written in the static. I have to answer, or she stays gone. I crawled to the wall. The receiver swung gently. I grabbed it. Cold, heavy, I pressed it to my ear. Silence. Then, rain. Heavy rain on a roof I'd never built. Clara's voice, raw with tears. "You left the window open, Eli. In this storm, the baby's crib is soaked." A sob. "Her blanket, the yellow one, it's ruined. She won't stop crying. She's so cold." Her voice dropped to a whisper, thick with accusation. "You knew about the storm. You always know. Why didn't you close it?" I'd never been in a storm with a baby. I'd never closed a window against rain for a child who didn't exist. The grief was a physical weight, crushing my chest. "Clara, I'm sorry, I didn't—" "Don't you dare apologize!" Her scream tore through the line, shredding the static. "You don't get to be sorry. You don't get to forget. You let her go. You let me go. You always let go." Her voice broke, dissolving into ragged sobs. "Why won't you hold on? Just hold on." The line filled with a new sound, not static. Water, rushing, churning water, and beneath it, a child's cry. Thin, terrified, fading. Clara's sobs grew louder, merging with the water, the cry. "She's gone. You let her go. You always let go." The water sound surged, becoming a roar. Clara's final scream was cut off by a sickening gurgle. Then silence, not dead air. The silence of deep, cold water. The silence of holding. Breath, forever. I dropped the receiver. It clattered on the floorboards. The room snapped back. Sunlight. The smell of coffee. The dryers thumping downstairs. My hands were covered in blood, not mine. Dark, slick blood coated my palms, dripping onto the floorboards where the coffee cup had shattered. I hadn't cut myself. The blood pooled around my feet, thick as oil, smelling faintly of lilacs and river mud. The receiver lay in the center of the blood pool. Its cord was gone, severed cleanly. The blood wasn't real. It couldn't be. I stumbled to the sink, scrubbing my hands raw under the scalding water. The blood wouldn't wash off. It clung to my skin like grease. I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, eyes wide with terror. But on my left cheek, smudged like a fingerprint, was a streak of that same dark blood. And in my reflection's eyes, burning with cold fire, was a tiny perfect image, a yellow baby blanket, sinking into dark, churning water. I called Dr. Evans. Her office line rang and rang. Voicemail. I called Finch. Disconnected. I called the police non-emergency line. 911 for emergencies only, sir. My voice was calm, too calm. There's blood and a phone and my daughter. She's in the water. The dispatcher's voice turned flat. "Sir, I'm going to need your address, and you need to stay calm." I gave her the address, hung up. The blood on my hands was gone, wiped clean, but the smell of lilacs and river mud remained, thick, suffocating. The police came, 2 officers, young, stern. They found no blood, no severed cord, just a patched hole in the wall and a man who hadn't slept in days. They asked questions. I told them about the phone, the calls, the blood, the baby in the water, their faces closed off. Professional pity. "We'll check the line, sir. Probably a prank call or—" One trailed off, glancing at his partner. "You've been taking those new meds Dr. Evans prescribed?" They left, patting my shoulder. "Get some rest. Call your doctor." I sat in the silent apartment. The duct tape patch on the wall seemed to pulse. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting, hungry. I knew what would happen. The next ring wouldn't be a call. It would be an ending, not just a memory, a reality. The one where Clara stayed, the one where the baby lived, the one where I built a porch with lilacs. I felt the threads of those lives fraying inside me, snapping one by one with every phantom ring. I was the fault line, the weak spot, the one who couldn't hold on, and the phone, it wasn't broken, it was a key to doors I'd locked, doors that were opening now, spilling static and sorrow into my world. Dusk bled into the room, gray light. The dryers downstairs fell silent. The silence deepened, thickened. From the patched hole in the wall, a single soft click. Like a switch being flipped, the duct tape bulged, split. The receiver slid out, landing silently on the floorboards. No cord, just the smooth ivory curve gleaming in the twilight. It didn't ring, it vibrated. A low subsonic thrum that shook the dust from the ceiling. The room dimmed further. The edges of the furniture blurred. The window showed only swirling gray fog. I was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, the receiver cradled in my lap. It was warm, humming, waiting. I raised it to my ear. No dial tone, no silence, just the sound of wind. Cold, high-altitude wind, and a voice. Not Clara's, my own voice, older, weary, full of a sorrow that had no bottom. "You finally picked up," it said. "Took you long enough. I've been waiting since the car crash, since you swerved to miss that dog and wrapped us around the oak tree, since you crawled out of the wreckage and left me pinned in the driver's seat, the steering column through my ribs, listening to you run away into the woods." A dry, humorless chuckle. "You forgot me, Eli. You buried me under pills and bad apartments and Finch's broken phones. But I remember the smell of gasoline, the cold rain on my face, the way you called my name once, then stopped to save yourself. I'd never been in a car crash. My brother Ben died in a hiking accident, alone. I was states away. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the words dissolved in my throat. The memory slammed into me. My memory now. The screech of tires, the shattering glass, the coppery smell of blood mixing with rain, Ben's hand reaching for mine through the broken windshield, his eyes wide with betrayal as I turned and ran, his voice fading behind me. "Eli, don't leave me." I'd buried it so deep, I'd given him a different death, a kinder death, a lie. "You can't run this time," my brother's voice whispered, thick with static. "This reality is ending right now, because you answered, because you finally remembered." The wind sound grew louder. The gray fog outside the window swirled faster. The walls of the apartment began to dissolve, not into nothing, but into a forest. Tall pines, snow dusting the branches, the smell of pine resin and cold earth, and beneath it, the metallic tang of blood. I was sitting on a bed of pine needles, not floorboards. The receiver was gone. In my hand was a blood-stained car key. Ben's key. The wind howled through the trees, and from the direction of the road, faint but clear, came the sound of an engine struggling to start, then sputtering, dying, silence, then a single wet cough. Close, too close. I dropped the key, scrambled back. The forest dissolved. I was back in the apartment. Sunlight streamed through the window, normal, safe. But on the floor where the receiver had lain, a single pine needle rested on the dusty floorboards, and the smell of blood and pine resin clung to my skin. The phone didn't ring again that night, or the next day. I sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for the vibration in my bones, waiting for the gray fog. Dr. Evans called, voice tight with concern. Eli? The police said, "Are you taking your medication?" I lied, said I was fine. Finch called. Heard you had trouble. Phone's gone. No more static. His voice was flat, afraid. I hung up. No one else called. The silence was a noose. On the third night, I knew it would come. I sat in the center of the room, cross-legged on the floor, the duct tape patch on the wall directly in front of me. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just waited. The city lights outside dimmed, street lights flickered out. The dryers downstairs fell silent. The silence deepened, becoming a physical pressure. The duct tape bulged, split. The receiver slid out, no cord. It landed softly, began to vibrate. The room dissolved into gray fog. I picked up the receiver, pressed it to my ear. No wind this time, no voices, just the sound of water. Calm, deep, lake water, and a child's laughter, giggling, splashing. My own voice, young and strong, filled with easy joy. Come on, sweetie, just a little. Further, I've got you. I'll never let go. The laughter grew louder, closer, then the splash, not playful. Panic, gurgling, a small, desperate cry. Daddy. I dropped the receiver. The fog cleared. I was standing knee-deep in cold, dark water. Not the city river, a lake, still. Silent under a bruised purple twilight sky, the water smelled of mud and lilies. On the shore, a rickety wooden dock stretched into the gloom, and in the water before me, bubbles rose to the surface, small, frenzied, then stopped. The laughter was gone, only the lap of water against the dock posts. My hands were empty, but on my forearm, dark water streamed down, carrying with it a single, sodden strand of yellow yarn from a baby blanket. The apartment snapped back. I was on my knees on the floorboards, gasping. The receiver lay silent beside me. The duct tape patch was whole, unbroken. But the smell of lake water and wet yarn filled the small room, and on my forearm, drying in the warm apartment air, was a perfect outline of a small grasping handprint. I understand now. The phone doesn't ring to me. It rings from the realities I abandoned, the lives I let slip away because the pain was too sharp, the guilt too heavy. Every time I answer, I remember, and the remembering unravels that world, snaps its thread, because I wasn't there. I didn't hold on. I left them in the water, in the car, in the hospital bed, in the storm. I am the fracture, the weak point where realities bleed out and die. And the phone, it's not broken. It's a siren calling me back to the wreckage, to finish what I started, to finally let go. The sun sets, the room fills with shadows. The duct tape patch on the wall is smooth, unbroken, but I feel it, the vibration, deep in the floorboards, in my teeth, in the hollow place behind my ribs. It's coming, the next ring, the next ending, the one where my mother didn't die alone in that sterile room while I was too afraid to get on a plane. The one where I held her hand as the machines flatlined, the one where I didn't run. I sit very still, waiting. The first ring shatters the silence, a harsh mechanical burring that echoes off the bare walls. I don't move. The second ring, louder, insistent. The third. My hand twitches. The fourth. The shadows in the corners deepen, stretching toward the center of the room like hungry fingers. The fifth ring. I close my eyes, not to shut it out, to let it in. The sixth ring. I reach for the receiver. My fingers brush the cold ivory. The seventh ring. I lift it. The vibration thrums up my arm into my chest. The eighth ring. I press it to my ear. The dial tone is gone, only the sound of a hospital monitor, steady, beeping, and my mother's voice, thin as tissue paper, whispering a lullaby I haven't heard since I was 5. The beeping slows, falters, her voice fades, the static rises, and beneath it, a new sound, a single wet sob. Mine? From a lifetime ago. From a life I'm about to erase. The line goes dead. The receiver slips from my numb fingers. It clatters on the floorboards. The room is silent. Still, the setting sun paints the walls gold. Normal. But the hospital smell lingers, antiseptic and wilted flowers. And on the floor beside the receiver, a single dried tear glistens in the fading light. Not mine, hers. The phone doesn't ring again. Not yet. But I know it will. It always does. And I know I'll answer, because the silence after the ring is worse. The silence of the water, the silence of the snow, the silence of the empty porch, the silence of all the lives I broke by not holding on. I pick up the receiver, place it gently back on its cradle, though there is no cradle, no cord, only the smooth ivory curve resting on the dusty wood. I sit down on the floor, back against the wall. I wait. The shadows lengthen. The city lights blink on outside the window. Somewhere a siren wails. A car horn honks. Life. Real life. The life where I am, alone. The life where I am the one who stays. The duct tape patch on the wall is smooth, unbroken, but I feel the vibration starting again, deep, cold, in the marrow of my bones, in the silence between heartbeats. I take a breath. I reach for the phone, and that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. I remember dying, but everyone says I'm fine. The shower water should have been hot, scalding, enough to burn the memory of ice water out of my bones. But it wasn't. It ran lukewarm and thin from the faucet, the same weak pressure that had plagued this apartment since I moved in after Clara left. I stood under it shivering, scrubbing my arms raw. My left forearm wouldn't clean. No matter how hard I scrubbed, how much soap I used, the skin remained stained a faint watery blue, like drowned flesh. And when the steam thickened, curling around me like grave mist, I could still feel it. The crushing weight of the river current, the shocking cold as it filled my mouth, the desperate flail of my legs against the muddy bottom as my lungs burned. I remembered the exact moment the world went silent, the bubbles rising past my face, silver and fragile, the streetlights above the water's surface, blurred and distant, like stars in a dream. The thought that cut through the panic, sharp and final. This is how I die. I turned off the water. The dripping echoed in the tiny bathroom. I toweled off slowly, avoiding the mirror. I didn't need to see the hollows under my eyes, the grayish pallor that clung to my skin no matter how much I slept. I knew what was there. I dressed in the bedroom, pulling on clean sweatpants and a t-shirt. The blue stain on my forearm had faded to a ghostly watermark, barely visible, just like the memory everyone insisted wasn't real. Downstairs, Mrs. Gable was feeding pigeons on her stoop. Her laundromat smelled of damp cotton and industrial soap. She beamed when she saw me. "Eli, you look better today. Color in your cheeks." Her eyes were sharp behind her thick glasses, missing nothing. The tremor in my hands, the way I gripped the railing too tightly. I forced a smile. "Just tired, Mrs. Gable?" "Bad dreams." She patted my arm. "Honey, you haven't slept at all since that little tumble last week. Finch said you slipped on the fire escape, Hit your head something awful. Lucky you landed in the bushes." Her voice dropped, conspiratorial. "Heard the ambulance sirens myself, scared the daylights out of me, but you bounced back quick, like a cat." She chuckled, offering me a stale cookie from her pocket. "No broken bones, no concussion. Doctor said it was a miracle." I took the cookie, nodded. A miracle. The word tasted like river mud. I hadn't slipped on the fire escape. I'd jumped, or rather, he had jumped. The man who lived in this body before the water took him. Before I woke up in the hospital bed, tubes in my arms, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging my nose, and a doctor with calm eyes telling me, "You're safe now, Mr. Vance. You fell, but you're fine, perfectly fine." I'd known it was a lie before the words were fully out. The memories weren't of falling, they were of sinking, of giving up, of the river pulling me down into its cold, dark embrace, while the city lights glittered like indifferent stars above. I walked to work. Data Key Solutions. Cubicle 4B. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a sound that used to be background noise. Now it felt like the river's roar, muffled but insistent. Brenda from HR intercepted me at the coffee machine. "Eli, glad you're back. We've all been so worried." Her smile was perfect, professional. Her eyes flickered over my face, cataloging. "Dr. Evans called this morning. He's pleased with your progress. Said the dissociative episode was severe, but the new meds are working." She slid a manila folder across the counter. My employee file opened to a page stamped. "Medical leave. Approved. Dates circled October 12th to October 19th. Today was October 20th. "Just a fall, sweetie," she repeated, her voice syrupy with concern. "You blacked out. Hit your head. It's understandable you'd have some vivid dreams. Trauma does that." She patted my hand. Her touch was warm, real. But the memory of icy water closing over my head was more real. I remembered the weight of my soaked clothes dragging me down, the panic as my foot snagged on a submerged branch. The last thought before the darkness took me, let go. It's easier to let go. I spent the day inputting insurance claims. Numbers blurred on the screen. Every time I blinked, I saw bubbles rising. The coppery taste of fear flooded my mouth. At lunch, Mark from accounting slid into the booth across from me in the break room. "Dude, you okay? You look like hell." I stared at my sandwich, turkey and avocado on rye. Clara's favorite. I hadn't eaten avocado in years. "I remember dying, Mark," I said quietly, the words scraping my throat raw. "In the river, last Tuesday night. I jumped off the bridge." Mark's smile froze. Then it crumpled into pity. "Whoa, heavy. Finch told us you had a bad fall off the fire escape. Concussion, maybe? Dr. Evans said—" "I didn't fall off the fire escape." The words came out too loud. Heads turned. Mark leaned in, voice low, urgent. "Eli, listen. Finch called the cops. They found you curled up at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge at 3 a.m. You were dry. Your shoes were clean. No mud, no river smell. Just confused, shaken, talking about water." He squeezed my arm. "The river's 3 blocks away, the bridge railing's 8 feet high. You'd have broken bones. You have nothing, not a scratch." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, slid it toward me. A photo. Me, sitting on a gurney under the bridge lights. My clothes were dry. My hair was neatly combed. My face was pale, terrified but unmarked. No water in my clothes, no mud on my shoes, just Eli Vance looking lost. "See? You were never in the water. It was a nightmare, a bad one, but it wasn't real. I stared at the photo. My own face stared back, hollow-eyed, yes, but dry, unharmed. The blue stain on my forearm was hidden under my sleeve. I remembered the cold metal of the gurney under my palms. I remembered the EMT's voice. "Easy now. You're safe. Just a fall." But I also remembered the water filling my lungs. The two memories clashed like broken glass in my skull. Which was the dream? The dry gurney under the bridge lights, or the suffocating dark of the river bottom? The copper taste surged back, thick and metallic. I pushed the phone away. "I remember the cold," I whispered. "I remember the bubbles." Mark's expression hardened. "Dr. Evans says that's the dissociation talking, the brain protecting itself from the trauma of the fall, creating a narrative to explain the fear." He stood up, gathering his lunch. "Get checked again, Eli. Seriously. This isn't healthy. You're scaring people." He walked away. The break room chatter resumed, but glances thrown my way were different now, warier, pitying. I saw Brenda watching from her office doorway. Her smile was tight, professional. She made a small, deliberate motion with her finger against her temple. Crazy. I left work early. The city streets felt alien, too bright, too loud. The roar of buses, the shriek of brakes, the blare of car horns, it all blurred into the sound of rushing water. I found myself walking toward the river, not the Sycamore Street Bridge where they'd found me dry, the old stone footbridge near the Botanical Gardens, where I'd jumped, where I'd died. The afternoon sun glinted off the slow-moving water. Couples strolled hand in hand. Joggers panted past. No one looked twice at the man standing rigidly on the bridge, hands gripping the cold stone railing. I leaned out, looked down. The water was murky green, swirling around pilings crusted with riverweed. I could see the reflection of the sky, fractured and rippling. And in that reflection, for a split second, I saw it, not my own face, but face bloated and pale, waterlogged, eyes wide and white like stones, mouth open in a silent scream. It vanished as a barge chugged past, churning the water into froth. I stumbled back, gasping. A young woman walking a golden retriever glanced at me, frowning. "You okay, mister?" Her dog whined, pulling toward the railing, hackles raised, staring at the spot where I'd seen the face. I ran, not home, to St. Vincent's Hospital. The ER waiting room smelled of bleach and despair. I waited 2 hours, my leg bouncing uncontrollably. When the young resident finally called my name, I blurted it out before he could sit down. "I died last Tuesday in the river, under the Sycamore Street Bridge." I remember it, the cold, the bubbles, the silence. I rolled up my sleeve, showing him the faint blue stain on my forearm. "See? Drowned flesh. It won't wash off." The resident, Dr. Chen, didn't flinch. He examined the stain with calm professionalism. "Interesting discoloration," he murmured, pressing it lightly. "Looks like a mild bruise, or possibly a reaction to laundry detergent, common in cheap apartments with old pipes." He pulled up my chart on his tablet. "Mr. Vance, your records are clear. You presented to the ER last Tuesday night after a fall from your fire escape, approximately 8 feet. You sustained a minor scalp laceration and a bruised wrist. No fractures, no signs of submersion, no hypothermia, your clothes were dry, your core temperature was normal." He swiveled the tablet toward me. Scans, X-rays, a CT scan of my head, all pristine, no trauma, No water in the lungs, no residue of river sediment under my nails. Nothing. Just Eli Vance, 32, with a minor head injury and a story no one believed. Dr. Evans has you on a low-dose antipsychotic for the dissociative episodes, Dr. Chen continued gently. He believes the fall triggered a stress response. Your brain created a detailed, immersive fantasy to cope with the fear of falling. It's not uncommon. The blue mark? Likely residual bruising from when you hit the ground. It'll fade. But I remember the water, I insisted, my voice cracking. I remember letting go. I remember the light fading. You remember a dream, he corrected, his tone kind but firm. A very vivid, traumatic dream. Your brain conflated the fear of falling with the fear of drowning. It's a protective mechanism. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You're not crazy, Eli. You're healing. Trust the process. Trust the facts. He wrote a new prescription, stronger antipsychotics, and patted my back as he ushered me out. Go home. Rest. Talk to Dr. Evans tomorrow. The sliding glass doors hissed shut behind me, sealing me out of the sterile, factual world. The river's roar filled my ears again. I looked down at my forearm. The blue stain seemed darker in a harsh afternoon light, like a fingerprint left by the dead. Dr. Evans's office was all beige carpet and framed motivational quotes. The mind is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. I sat rigidly in the plush chair, staring at the Rorschach blot on his desk. He listened quietly as I described the river, the bubbles, the face in the water. He took notes, nodded thoughtfully. The persistence of the memory is significant, Eli, he said finally, steepling his fingers. But persistence doesn't equal reality. Our brains are remarkable storytellers. After trauma, they weave narratives to make sense of the senseless. Your fall was terrifying. Your subconscious reached for the most primal fear it could find, drowning. It's not uncommon for near-death experiences, even imagined ones, to feel hyper-real. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Here's what we know for certain. You were found dry under the Sycamore Street Bridge. Your physical exam showed 0 signs of submersion. Your medical records are consistent with a minor fall, not a near drowning. Your memories are inconsistent with the physical evidence. Therefore, the memories are unreliable. He slid a brochure across the desk. Understanding Dissociative Amnesia. Reclaiming Your Narrative. The medication will help. Quiet the intrusive thoughts. Give it time. And Eli? Stop going to the river. Avoid triggers. Your mind needs safety to heal. I took the brochure, didn't read it, walked home in a daze. The streets felt tilted, unreal, like a stage set. I passed a newsstand. The headline screamed, Mysterious Death in River, Body Found Near Sycamore Street Bridge. My blood froze. I grabbed the paper. October 19th, yesterday. A young man, mid-30s, no ID, found tangled in debris near the pilings, cause of death, drowning. Time of death estimated 2:00 a.m. to 4 a.m. Tuesday night. My night. I fumbled for coins, bought the paper, my hands shaking so badly I tore the pages. I hurried home, locking the door behind me, drawing the curtains. I spread the paper on the kitchen table. The grainy photo of the recovered body, bloated, face obscured by riverweed, sent a jolt through me. Not my face, a stranger's. But the clothes, waterlogged jeans, a dark hoodie. It could have been me. The article mentioned a witness, An elderly man walking his dog at 3 a.m. who saw a tall figure jump but couldn't identify them in the dark. The police were treating it as suicide. No foul play suspected. I sank to the floor. The newspaper crumpled in my lap. The blue stain on my forearm pulsed faintly, cold against my skin. The copper taste flooded my mouth. This was proof. This was the truth. I died. This other man, this John Doe, had died instead. Or I was John Doe, stolen from the river, dumped dry on the bridge, given Eli Vance's life like a hand-me-down coat that didn't quite fit. The apartment felt suffocating. The peeling wallpaper seemed to breathe. The old pipes groaned like a dying thing. I needed air. I needed to see the bridge. Now I ran, ignoring the ache in my chest that wasn't there before, the strange lightness in my limbs. The city blurred past. At the Sycamore Street Bridge, police tape fluttered in the breeze, cordoning off a section near the railing. 2 cops stood guard, bored. I approached cautiously. "Excuse me, I think I might have seen something the night that man died." One cop, a heavy-set man with a mustache, eyed me. "You with the media? We're not giving interviews." "No, I live nearby. I saw a guy jump Tuesday night around 3 a.m. The cop's partner, younger, leaned in. "Yeah? What did he look like?" "Tall," I said, my voice tight. "Wearing a dark hoodie, he just climbed over and let go. No hesitation." The young cop exchanged a glance with his partner. The older one sighed. "Look, pal, we got that report. From an old guy walking his poodle. Said the same thing. But here's the thing." He pointed to the railing. "No scuff marks. No fibers caught on the metal. No witness saw anyone approach the bridge that night on the cameras." He gestured to a small weatherproof camera mounted on a lamppost. "We checked. Clear. From midnight to 5 a.m. No one came near this railing except the old man and his dog. And you," he tapped his notebook. "You, Eli Vance, found sitting right here at 3:17 a.m., dry as a bone, babbling about a jump you didn't take. Security footage confirms it. You were alone. You never went near the railing." He closed his notebook with a snap. "Grief does funny things. That John Doe, he was your neighbor, wasn't he? Apartment 3B, 2 floors down. Real quiet guy. Worked nights. You probably barely knew him, but losing someone close, it messes with your head. Makes you see things. Makes you feel things that aren't yours." He put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Go home, son. Take your meds. Let the dead rest." I walked away, numb. Apartment 3B? I'd never noticed who lived there. Had I seen him in the hall? At the mailboxes? His face in the newspaper was a stranger's, but the blue stain on my arm burned cold. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights cast long, shifting shadows on the wall. The shadows looked wrong, thicker, hungrier. At 2:17 a.m., the time the cop said I was found on the bridge, the shadows in the corner of my room detached. Not my shadow, something else. A deeper darkness, coalescing into a shape, tall, thin, dripping. It didn't move toward me. It pointed, not at me, at the closet. Its form was indistinct, wavering like heat haze, but the finger was clear, accusing. I stood slowly, my heart hammering against ribs that felt too fragile. I opened the closet. Nothing, just coats. I pushed them aside, and there, behind my winter parka, taped to the back wall, was a small waterproof bag. I hadn't put it there. I tore it open. Inside was a wallet. Waterlogged, swollen. The ID photo showed a man with my eyes, my jawline, but not my face. His name, Daniel Shaw. Address: Apartment 3B, 17 Sycamore Street, the John Doe from the river. Tucked behind the ID was a folded piece of paper. My own handwriting covered it, jagged and frantic. I took his place. The water gave him to me. It wanted a life. I offered mine. It took his instead. I am not Eli Vance. I am the space where he drowned. I remember the bubbles. I remember the letting go. They call it a miracle. It was a theft. Burn this. Forget. But I can't forget the cold. I can't forget the light fading. They say I'm fine. I am not fine. I am Daniel Shaw's ghost wearing Eli's skin. The river is in my bones. It is always hungry. I dropped the note. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. The dripping shadow was gone. Only moonlight pooled on the floorboards. I sank to my knees, the wallet clutched in my hand. Daniel Shaw's face smiled up at me from the ID, a life cut short, a life I'd stolen. The blue stain on my forearm was a deep, unnatural indigo now spreading like a bruise toward my elbow. The copper taste was a river in my mouth. I remembered, not just the drowning, the bargain. Standing on the bridge, the river whispering up through the cracks in the concrete, a voice like wet stones grinding. Together, one life for another, your pain for his peace, jump, and we will give you back the life you lost. Clara's face swam in my mind, her laughter, the scent of her hair, the warmth of her hand in mine, the loneliness that had hollowed me out after she left. I'd stepped onto the railing, closed my eyes. Take me, give me back what I lost. The cold hit, the current pulled, and in the dark water, something cold and ancient wrapped around my ankles, not to drag me down, but to push. I broke the surface gasping, not on the riverbank, but dry and shivering at the base of the Sycamore Street Bridge. Eli Vance's life flooded back into me, his memories, his apartment, his job. But beneath them, like a deep, cold current, flowed Daniel Shaw's final moments. The river hadn't given me back my life. It had given me his, and it was still hungry. I called Dr. Evans at 3 a.m. His voicemail was full. I called Brenda, straight to voicemail. I called Mark. Same. I sat on the floor, Daniel Shaw's wallet in my lap, the note crumpled in my fist. The street lights outside flickered, died. The apartment plunged into darkness. Only the glow of the digital clock on the stove, 3:17 a.m., the time I was found, the time Daniel Shaw died. The shadows in the corners deepened. Not one shadow, many, dozens, thin, dripping shapes, coalescing from the gloom. They didn't point. They reached. Cold, watery fingers brushed my skin. The whisper filled the room, not in my ears, but in the marrow of my bones. He is not yours. Give him back. The bargain was for one. You took two. The river is hungry. I scrambled back, hitting the wall. I didn't know. I just wanted to stop hurting. The pain is the price. The voices hissed, a chorus of wet echoes. You stole his rest. Now you will rest in the deep places where the light does not reach. The shadows surged forward, not to touch me, to become me. I felt them seeping into my skin, my bones, my breath. The blue stain on my arm spread like ink and water, swallowing my hand, my wrist. The copper taste became the taste of mud and decay. I remembered Daniel Shaw's last thought, not fear, but relief. Relief at the cold. Relief at the silence. Relief at the letting go. And I understood. The river didn't want Daniel Shaw back. It wanted me. It wanted the life I'd stolen. It wanted the pain I'd tried to bury. It wanted the space where Eli Vance had drowned his grief, and Daniel Shaw had drowned his life. It wanted the hollow place inside me. I stopped fighting. Let the cold fill me. Let the shadows pull me down. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me whole was my own hand, raised in surrender. The blue stain was gone. My skin was pale, unmarked, clean, and on the floor where I'd been sitting, Daniel Shaw's wallet lay open. His ID photo smiled up, peaceful, at peace. The note was gone. Only a single waterlogged maple leaf rested beside the wallet. Out of season, out of place, glistening with river water. Outside, the streetlights flickered back on. Dawn bled gray over the city. In the apartment above Mrs. Gable's laundromat, the shower ran. Lukewarm water streamed down the tiles. A man stood beneath it, scrubbing his arms. His left forearm was perfectly clean, unblemished. He turned off the water, dried himself, dressed. He walked downstairs, nodding to Mrs. Gable on her stoop. "Morning, Mrs. Gable. Beautiful day." His voice was calm, steady. He walked to Data Key Solutions, Cubicle 4B. He input insurance claims with quiet efficiency. At lunch, Mark from accounting joined him. "Rough night?" Mark asked, eyeing the dark circles under the man's eyes. The man smiled, a warm, easy smile. "Just dreams. Dr. Evans says they'll fade." He took a bite of his turkey and avocado sandwich, Clara's favorite. He didn't notice the faint scent of river water that clung to his skin. He didn't feel the cold spot in his chest where a heart should beat. He didn't see the shadow that followed him, a shadow that didn't quite match his shape, a shadow that dripped faintly on the linoleum floor, a shadow that pointed not at the world, but at the hollow place inside his own chest. He was fine, perfectly fine. The doctor said so. The records proved it. The river had taken its due, and the man who remembered dying, he was finally at rest, deep in the cold, dark water where the light never reached, where the bubbles rose like silver prayers and the silence was a blanket. The apartment was quiet, the shadows were still, and on the kitchen table, untouched, sat a new prescription bottle. The label read, "Eli Vance. Take one daily for dissociative episodes." The pills inside were untouched, unneeded. The man didn't need them anymore. He remembered nothing. He was fine. He was home. He was empty. The river had won. And the thing wearing Eli Vance's skin smiled, tasting the copper on its tongue, and reached for another bite of sandwich. The hunger was quiet now, but it was never gone. It was only waiting for the next life, the next bargain, the next hollow place to fill. The shadow on the wall didn't move. It didn't need to. It was already inside, already home, already hungry. The silence in the apartment wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of the deep water, the silence after the last bubble rises, the silence of a life stolen and a life given back, empty, perfect, and utterly, terrifyingly fine. And that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. Everyone in my town has my face except me. It began with the barista. I walked into the daily grind, same as every Tuesday at 7:13 a.m., ordered a large black coffee, no room, and waited by this pastry case, scrolling through weather alerts on my phone. Rain expected by noon. Nothing unusual. Then she called my name. "Alex, your coffee's ready." I looked up. She was holding the cup, smiling, the warm, slightly distracted smile I'd seen 100 times, but something snagged in my chest like a fish hook catching on line. Her face, not like mine. Exactly mine. Same asymmetrical brow, left arch slightly higher, same faint scar above the right eyebrow, a relic of a childhood fall off a swing set I never told anyone about. Same subtle dent in the chin, same way the left nostril flared just a hair more when she smiled. I froze. She tilted her head. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice was different, higher, smoother, but the cadence, the slight pause before ghost, the way her tongue tapped the roof of her mouth on the g, that was mine. That was the way I spoke when I was trying not to sound startled. I took the coffee, mumbled thanks. My fingers brushed hers, warm, dry, unremarkable, and yet a jolt ran up my arm. Not electric. Recognition, like touching a limb I'd forgotten I had. I sat at my usual corner table back to the wall and stared into the black liquid. My reflection wavered in the ceramic, pale, sleep-etched, hair in that same stubborn cowlick that refused to lie flat. Normal? Familiar? Then I looked up. The man at the next table, reading the Chronicle, glasses perched low, turned a page and blinked. Same slow, deliberate blink. Same tiny twitch in the left eyelid just after. I shifted in my seat. He didn't look at me, just sipped his tea. But the angle of his wrist as he lifted the cup, my angle, the way he rested his elbow on the table, my habit, born from a childhood elbow fracture that never quite healed straight. A cold thread unspooled in my gut. I left without finishing the coffee. Outside, the town breathed its usual autumn rhythm. School buses idling, delivery vans double-parked, Mrs. Callahan walking her terrier past the post office. I nodded automatically at Officer Ruiz directing traffic at Maple and 3rd. He waved back, and as he turned, sunlight caught his profile. I stopped dead. Same nose, not similar. Identical. The slight bump on the bridge where mine had been broken in high school during a stupid fight behind the bleachers, a secret I'd never told anyone, not even my sister. Same downturn at the corners of the mouth when at rest. Same way his hairline receded, exactly like mine. Same faint widow's peak, same 2 stubborn strands that refused to gray. My breath went shallow. I walked faster, head down toward City Hall, my destination, my alibi. I worked in records, quiet job, safe job. Files didn't stare back, but the sidewalk was a hall of mirrors. The teenager skateboarding past, same jawline, same distracted frown as he wiped hair from his eyes. The woman waiting for the crosswalk, same posture, same unconscious habit of shifting weight to a left foot, same faint crease between her brows when concentrating. The bus driver leaning out his window, shouting to a cyclist, same laugh lines fanning from the eyes. Mild laugh lines. I'd traced them in the bathroom mirror last week, wondering when they'd gotten so deep. By the time I pushed through the heavy oak doors of City Hall, my hands were clammy, my shirt clinging to my back. "Morning, Alex," chirped Marjorie from accounting, bustling past with a stack of folders. She didn't look at me, but her voice, it wasn't just tone, it was timbre. The slight rasp in the lower register, the one I got after talking too long at town meeting. The way she clipped the G in morning. My towel, speech pattern, down to the microsecond pause before the nay. I made it to my cubicle, shut the door, flimsy particle board, barely a barrier, and sank into my chair. My hands trembled as I logged in. I pulled up the employee directory, scrolled. Every photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, every face. Me, not lookalikes, not doppelgangers in the eerie folkloric sense. No uncanny valley, no grotesque mimicry. Just me. Same eyes. Hazel, flecked with gold near the pupil, darker at the rim. Same faint asymmetry in the ears, left slightly lower. Same tiny mole behind the right earlobe. I'd only noticed it last year during a physical. I clicked on security camera footage from the lobby. Time stamped 8:02 a.m. There I was, walking in, coat over my arm, glancing at my watch, except I hadn't arrived until 8:17. The figure on screen paused at the directory board, my habitual hesitation, head tilting left, eyes scanning top to bottom, exactly as I did. Because my right eye had slightly worse acuity, and I compensated unconsciously. But it wasn't me. I rewound, watched again. The coat was different, navy instead of my charcoal. The watch a silver face, not my black digital. Yet the movement, the set of the shoulders, the way the left hand flexed slightly when reaching for the door handle. It was like watching a reflection with a 3-second delay. A knock on my door. I jumped. It opened before I could answer. "Alex, you in?" It was Carl from maintenance, round face, friendly, always smelled like sawdust and peppermints, except his face wasn't round, not anymore. As he stepped in, light from the hallway hit him full on. Same bone structure, same narrow bridge at the nose, same slight indentation above the upper lip. The one my mother used to say made me look perpetually skeptical. He smiled. "Heard you looked like you'd seen a ghost at the coffee shop. Everything all right?" His teeth, even the tiny chip on the left incisor from biting into a frozen candy cane at age 10. My chip. I'm fine, I managed. "Just tired." He nodded. "Yeah, long night, huh?" He leaned against the door frame. My stance. Weight on the right leg, left knee bent, arms crossed just so. Dream's been weird lately. Feels like walking through someone else's life, you know? My throat closed. "No," I whispered. "I don't." He studied me, not with suspicion, with concern. The kind you'd give yourself if you saw yourself faltering. "You sure? You look off, like you don't recognize yourself." The words hung in the air. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by my window, curtains open, watching the street. Maple Creek wasn't big. Population 2,318 per the last census I'd filed. Quiet. Trees, brick storefronts, a single traffic light that blinked yellow after 9 p.m. At 11:47 p.m., Mrs. Gable across the street took out her trash. She walked with a cane, slow, deliberate, and as the porch light caught her face, there it was, the same tired set to the eyes, the same way her mouth tightened at the corners when she bent. My expression, when I was trying not to cry. At 1:03 a.m., a pickup rolled down the street. Danny Reeves' night shift at the mill. He waved lazily at the empty road. Same wave, same lazy flick of the wrist, same 2 fingers raised. I knew because I did that. Every time I passed someone I vaguely recognized but didn't want to stop for. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass. Was I losing it? Had I cracked? Some latent psychosis triggered by stress, isolation, the slow erosion of routine? Or was it something else? I dug out my high school yearbook, Maple Creek High, class of 2008 ARC, flipped to the senior portraits, page after page, every face, me, different haircuts, different clothes, smiling, serious, awkward, my awkwardness, the way my neck tensed informal. Photos, but the features, identical. I scrolled through old class photos on my laptop, the 5th grade field trip to the Science Museum, the 8th grade band concert, every child, every adult chaperone, every single face, mine, even the teachers, even the bus driver in the background of the group shot. I clicked on a random news archive, Maple Creek Gazette, July 12th, 1994, Town celebrates centennial. Black and white photo. Crowds lining Main Street. Parade floats. Mayor cutting the ribbon. I zoomed. The mayor, same face. The woman holding the flag, same face. The boy riding the lead horse, same face, younger but unmistakable. The dog beside him, even the dog had eyes that looked familiar. Not human, but the shape of the gaze, the quiet intensity. I shut the laptop. My hands were ice. I walked to the bathroom, flipped on the light. The mirror showed me, pale, wide-eyed, hair disheveled. I leaned closer, same pores, same faint redness on the left cheek, where I'd shaved too close, same tiny scar on the chin from a bicycle crash at 7. But something was off, not in the reflection, in me. I blinked. The reflection blinked. I raised my right hand. The reflection raised its left. Standard mirror reversal. But then I lifted only my index finger. The reflection lifted its index finger. Then, without me moving, I saw it. The reflection's middle finger twitched just once. A microspasm. I hadn't done that. I stared. The reflection stared back. And slowly, so slowly I thought I imagined it. Its lips parted, not to speak, to smile. A small, knowing smile. The kind you give when you've just remembered where you left the keys. I stumbled back, hit the sink. The light flickered. When it steadied, the reflection was normal again. Just me, exhausted, terrified. But the air smelled different. Not toothpaste and old plumbing. Rain on pine needles. The scent from the woods behind my house. The scent I'd only ever smelled once before. In a dream, years ago, where I walked down a foggy road and saw a figure ahead, wearing my coat, my shoes, and turning, just as I caught up, only to find no one there, and the road behind me, gone. I didn't go to work the next day. I drove, out of town, west, past the county line, past the billboard that read, "You are now leaving Maple Creek, a place to belong." I stopped at a gas station in Ellsworth, population 1,842. Stepped inside. The clerk looked up from a crossword. I braced myself. But no, he was older, weathered, deep laugh lines, a nose broken twice, gray stubble. Different. I nearly wept with relief. "Coffee?" he asked, voice gravelly, unfamiliar. "Yes, please." He poured it, slid it across the counter. I fumbled for my wallet. He glanced at me, really looked, and frowned. "Huh?" he said. "What?" He tapped his temple. "You've got that Maple Creek look." My blood chilled. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Dunno, just the way you hold yourself. The eyes, like you're waiting for something to catch up with you." He paused. "You from there?" I nodded. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "Funny thing about that town. Used to deliver propane up there back in the 90s. Never could figure it out. Every time I drove in past the old stone bridge, you know the one, the radio'd cut out. GPS'd spin, and everyone, they all looked related, not just similar. Same, like one mold poured over and over." He shook his head. "Stopped going. Gave me the creeps. Last time I was there, 07 maybe, saw a kid riding a bike. Looked exactly like the mayor. Same kid, I swear, 10 years younger. Same scratch on the knee. Same helmet strap dangling." He held my gaze. "You ever look in the mirror and wonder, who was here before you?" I left the coffee on the counter, drove back. Not because I wanted to, because the Subaru turned on its own. The key wasn't in the ignition, yet the engine purred. The steering wheel turned left to the county line. I didn't fight it. By the time I crossed the stone bridge, the one he'd mentioned, the GPS on my phone rebooted. One notification. "Welcome to Maple Creek. Population 2,319, 2,319, not 2,318. I was back, and there was one more. I parked in front of my house. Lights were on inside. I hadn't left them on. I climbed the steps. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open. The living room was tidy, too tidy. My coffee mug, washed, dried, placed precisely in the center of the kitchen counter. My favorite sweater folded on the arm of the sofa, and on the coffee table, a single photo, a Polaroid. Me, sitting in this very chair. But I wasn't in the chair now. In the photo, I was smiling. A real smile, not the tight, polite one I wore in town. The kind I hadn't felt in years. On the back, in handwriting that matched my own perfectly. He's starting to notice. Soon he'll understand. Soon he'll be ready to let go. I turned. The hallway mirror reflected the empty room, except in the glass behind me, a figure stood in the doorway. Same height, same build, wearing my robe. Its face was turned away. But I knew, because as it raised its hand to the light switch, the movement was smoother, more certain, like it had done this 1,000 times, and when it finally turned, slowly, deliberately, its face wasn't blank, it wasn't distorted, it was me, but rested at peace, eyes clear, no fear, no questions, just quiet acceptance. It smiled, not at me. For me? Then it reached out, not toward me, but past me, toward the mirror. Its fingers touched the glass, and the surface didn't resist. It rippled like water, and behind it, not my living room, a hallway, warm light, a door ajar, a voice, muffled but familiar, my voice, but calm, content, saying, "Come on in, you're home." I didn't move. The figure in the mirror waited, patient. It knew I'd seen the truth now. The town wasn't filled with people who looked like me. It was filled with me. Everyone, the child on the bike, the mayor, the barista, the bus driver, all fragments, echoes, shells waiting to be shed, and this one, this calm, smiling version, was the next, the one who remembered, the one who belonged, the one who knew the way. My breath fogged the glass. The figure mirrored it. Then softly it mouthed 2 words. I knew them before it formed them, because they were the words I'd whispered to myself every night for the past week, in the dark, hoping they weren't true. It's time. I lifted my hand, trembling, pressed it to the mirror, where its hand waited. The glass was cold, then warm, then gone. I stepped through. The door clicked, shut behind me. Outside, in the quiet street, a neighbor walked past my house. She glanced at the window, saw me, the one who'd just stepped inside, pulling back the curtain, smiling, waving. She waved back. Same smile, same wave, same face. And in her pocket, her phone buzzed. A new notification. Welcome to Maple Creek. Population 2,300 and that's where this story ends. Let's move on to the next one. My therapist told me I don't exist. I rented a cheap room in an abandoned home because it was all I could afford, and because, if I'm honest, I like the idea. There's something about decay that feels honest, like the world finally admitting it's fallen apart, just like the rest of us. The listing was sparse. Private room, utilities included, $350 a month, no questions asked. No photos, no address until after I wired the deposit. That should have been my first red flag, but I didn't have a job. My savings were bleeding out, and the last apartment I'd lived in had left me with mold in my lungs and a landlord who'd threatened to sue me for emotional damages after I reported him to housing inspection. So I said yes. I got a text with coordinates. A pin dropped in the woods 20 miles outside of Galesburg, Illinois. The house stood at the end of a gravel drive overgrown with thistle and wild sumac, its roof sagging like a spine bent by decades of weight. 2 stories, clapboard siding peeling in long gray strips, windows boarded or broken, one porch column snapped clean through and propped up with a rusted sawhorse. The front door hung open a few inches, swaying slightly in the late afternoon breeze as if someone or something had just stepped out. Inside, the air smelled of damp plaster, mouse droppings, and something sharper, like ozone after a lightning strike, or the metallic tang of blood left too long in the sink. My footsteps echoed hollowly across the warped floorboards. A narrow hallway led past 3 closed doors. At the end, a staircase spiraled up into shadow. A man stood beside it. He startled me, not because he moved, but because he hadn't been there a second before. One blink, empty space. Next blink, him. He was tall, gaunt, wearing a tweed jacket that might have been stylish in 1973, his hair thin and neatly combed, skin papery with age, but eyes startlingly bright, almost feverish. He smiled, not warmly, precisely, like a scalpel, finding its mark. "Elias," he said, not a question, a confirmation. I nodded. "You're the landlord?" "I am Dr. Arlen Voss," he replied, and yes, in a manner of speaking. He extended a hand. His grip was dry, cool, and lasted a beat too long. "The room is upstairs, last door on the left. You'll find it accommodating." He handed me an old brass key, tarnished, heavy, and turned without another word, vanishing into the darkness beneath the stairs. I called after him, about mail, about trash pickup, about anything. But no reply came. When I looked back, the space under the staircase was just a closet, empty, dusty. Had he gone inside? I hadn't heard a door open. Upstairs, the hallway was narrower, the ceiling lower, the wood groaning underfoot like it resented being walked upon. The last door on the left opened with a reluctant creak. The room was small but clean, too clean. A narrow bed with a faded quilt, a wooden desk, empty except for a single drawer, a wardrobe with both doors slightly ajar. One window, its glass cracked but intact, looked out over the overgrown backyard and a crumbling stone well half swallowed by ivy. No electricity, no outlets. A kerosene lantern sat on the desk, full, a box of matches beside it. I dropped my duffel bag and sat on the bed. The springs shrieked. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane. I lit the lantern. The flame wavered, casting long, trembling shadows. That's when I noticed the writing, not on the walls, not carved into the wood, on the glass. Someone had written on the inside of the window pane in what looked like grease pencil or charcoal, smudged but legible. "He watches through the walls when you sleep. Don't turn the light off. Don't close your eyes before the flame dies." I stared at it, wiped it with my sleeve. It didn't budge, not smudged, not even a streak. Like it had been etched into the glass itself, though there were no scratches beneath my fingertips. I lit a cigarette. I chained smoke then before the coughs got worse, and opened a window a few inches to let the smoke out. The night air was cold, still. No crickets, no owls, just silence, thick and absolute. Then a sound, a tap. From the wall behind the wardrobe, 2 seconds of quiet, then another. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, deliberate, not random settling, not a branch. This was knocking. I stood, walked to the wardrobe, pulled the doors open. Inside, empty hangers, a moth-eaten coat on the floor, and, on the back panel, a child's handprint in dust. Fresh, as if pressed there minutes ago. I turned, heart thudding. The lantern flame dipped low, then flared. In its sudden surge of light, I saw a face in the window, pressed against the glass from the outside, pale, gaunt, lips parted in a silent smile, eyes wide, black, empty, no whites, no pupils, just void. I stumbled back, knocked the lantern off the desk. The glass chimney shattered, the flame guttered, died. Darkness. I fumbled for the matches, struck one. The flame caught, trembling. I held it up. The window was empty. No face, no smudges, nothing. I spent the night sitting upright on the bed, back against the wall, knees drawn to my chest, the last match clutched in my sweating palm. I didn't sleep. I barely breathed. Every creak of the house was a footstep, every draft a sigh against my neck. At dawn, gray light seeped through the cracks in the boards outside. I opened the window fully. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting leaves. The well in the yard looked deeper than it had the day before. I found Dr. Voss in the kitchen. He was boiling water on a butane stove, humming softly. Something modal, dissonant, like Gregorian chant played backward. A single mug sat beside him. Steam curled from its rim. "Good morning, Elias," he said, not turning. "Sleep well?" I didn't answer, just stared at the back of his head, at the way his scalp showed through the fine strands of hair, at how his neck seemed too long, too thin, like a bird's. He poured the water into the mug, stirred, turned. His eyes weren't just bright now. They glinted, not with light, with something else, like there was glass behind them, or film. "Tea?" he offered. I declined. He smiled, not unkindly. "You're tense. Understandable. New environment. Unfamiliar stimuli. The mind seeks patterns, even where none exist." He sipped. "Have you ever considered therapy?" That's how it began. Not with an ad, not with a referral. Just a quiet question in a ruined kitchen, steam rising between us like a veil. I said yes. What else was I going to say? He told me his office was in the basement. Unconventional, I know, but quiet, undisturbed, ideal for deep work. The basement door was behind the stairs, low, heavy, reinforced with iron bands. It opened with a groan that vibrated in my teeth. The stairs descended into absolute black. "Lights are on a timer," he said. "They'll come on when you reach the bottom." I went down, 10 steps, 11, 12. Click. Fluorescent tubes flickered overhead, buzzing to life. The room was windowless, concrete-walled, 10 feet square, a single chair in the center, black leather, high-backed, bolted to the floor. Beside it, a small table with a glass of water, a notepad, a pen. No desk, no couch, no diplomas on the wall, just the chair and the mirror. It covered the entire far wall, floor to ceiling, edge to edge, framed in brushed steel. I sat. Dr. Voss didn't sit. He stood beside the mirror, hands clasped behind its back, watching me with that same precise smile. "Tell me, Elias," he began, voice soft, hypnotic. "When did you first notice the gaps?" Gaps? In memory, in sensation, in continuity. He tilted his head, like missing frames in a film, a blink, and suddenly you're elsewhere. You don't recall walking there. You don't recall deciding to go. You just arrive. I thought of the night before, the face in the window, the knocking, the way I'd known. The writing was on the glass before I saw it. Yes, I admitted. He nodded. Good. Honesty is the first fracture we must widen to let the light in. He stepped closer. Now, look at the mirror. I did. My reflection stared back, pale, dark circles under my eyes, hair unkempt. But something was wrong. My reflection wasn't blinking in sync with me. I blinked. It blinked after, a half-second delay. I raised my right hand. It raised its left. No, it should raise its left. That's how mirrors work. But I lowered my hand. It kept its hand raised. Smiling? Not my smile. Smaller, sharper. I whipped my head toward Dr. Voss. He hadn't moved, still standing by the mirror, still smiling. Don't look away, he said gently. The dissociation intensifies with avoidance. I turned back. The reflection was gone. The mirror showed only the empty room behind me, the chair, the table, the stairs. But no, wait. The chair wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in it, slumped, head lolling, one arm dangling over the side, a man in a gray hoodie, jeans, scuffed sneakers, my clothes, my body. I stood, staggered back, hit the wall. Sit down, Elias, Dr. Voss said. Calm, unmoved. I shook my head. That's me. No, he said. That's the vessel, the placeholder, the echo. He stepped in front of the mirror, blocking my view. You see, Elias, consciousness isn't generated. It's captured. Like radio waves, like static on a dead channel, the brain doesn't produce the self. It tunes to it. And sometimes the signal degrades. Sometimes the frequency shifts. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small device, black, smooth, no buttons, no seams, like obsidian shaped by water. This, he said, is a resonator. It stabilizes the carrier wave. He held it out. Hold it, just for a moment. I didn't want to, but my hand moved anyway. Reached, took it, cold, heavy, humming faintly, not in my ears, but inside my skull. A low subsonic drone that made my teeth ache. The mirror flickered. The image of my body in the chair dissolved like smoke. In its place, static. Black and white noise rolling and churning like an old TV with no signal. Then a shape emerged. A silhouette. Featureless. Humanoid. But wrong. Limbs too long, head too narrow, neck bent at an impossible angle. It stood in a reflection, facing me, though I was facing the mirror. It raised a hand, not to wave, to point at me at my chest. Dr. Voss's voice came from far away. You've been fading for months, Elias. Longer, perhaps. You stopped recognizing your own face in photos. You forgot your mother's voice. You'd reach for your keys and find them already in your hand, but you didn't remember picking them up. You thought it was stress, dementia, sleep deprivation. He stepped closer. It wasn't. The silhouette in the mirror took a step forward, not toward the glass, through it, its fingers pressed against the surface from the inside, the glass bulging inward like rubber. Your signal is weak, Dr. Voss whispered. The resonance is failing. You're slipping out of phase, and when the dissonance reaches critical threshold, he paused, smiled. You cease to exist. The glass rippled like water. The silhouette's hand broke through, gray, translucent, veins like cracks in porcelain. I dropped the resonator. It hit the floor and didn't bounce. It sank, sinking into the concrete like it was mud, vanishing in seconds. The silhouette lunged, not at me, through me, cold, beyond cold, like liquid nitrogen poured into my veins. My vision whited out. My ears filled with a high-pitched whine, then silence. Then I was sitting in the chair, my hands on my knees, my breath shallow. Dr. Voss stood before me, notepad in hand, pen poised. "How do you feel?" he asked. I opened my mouth. No sound came. I tried again. My throat worked, but no voice, just air. Panic surged. I clutched my neck, felt the Adam's apple rise and fall. But nothing. Dr. Voss nodded. The aphasia is progressing, expected. As the self destabilizes, language centers degrade first, then motor control, then autonomic functions. He scribbled something. "You're losing cohesion, Elias. You're becoming noise." I stood, tried to run. My legs wouldn't obey. They moved, yes, but slowly, jerkily, like a film skipping frames. One step, two, then blackout. I was at the top of the basement stairs. How? I didn't remember climbing. I turned, looked down. The basement door was closed, locked. From the inside, a tap came. Then another. Tap, tap, tap. The same rhythm as before. I fled upstairs, slammed my bedroom door, locked it, though the lock was rusted, useless. I stared at the window. The writing was back, but changed. "He's in the walls now. He's in the floor. He's in your breath. Turn off the light. Let him in. It hurts less that way." I backed away, sat on the bed. My hands were trembling. I raised them, looked at my palms. The skin, it wasn't solid. In the lantern light, it shimmered, like heat haze over asphalt, like a signal losing strength. I touched my face. My fingers passed through my cheek for a fraction of a second. Not pain, not fear, just absence, a hole where I should be. That night, I didn't fight sleep. I lay down, blew out the lantern. Darkness. Then a sound. Not knocking. Breathing. From the wardrobe. Slow. Wet. Ragged. Not mine. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The wardrobe doors creaked open. Something stepped out. I didn't look. I couldn't. But I felt it. Cold air pooling around my feet. The mattress dipping. Not at my side, but beneath me, as if something were climbing up through the bed. A hand, dry, papery, familiar, rested on my chest, not pressing, just anchoring, like a technician securing a cable. A voice, my voice, but hollow, distant, like it was coming from a speaker buried deep underground, whispered in my ear. "Let go. You were never here to begin with." I tried to scream. Nothing came out. I tried to move. My body didn't respond. But my eyes opened. Not I opened them. They opened. And in the darkness, I saw myself, standing beside the bed, pale, gaunt, smiling, wearing my face, wearing my clothes. But wrong. The eyes, black, empty, the mouth too wide. It leaned down. Its breath smelled of damp earth and static. It whispered, "Thank you for the room." Then silence, absolute. I tried to think, but thoughts unraveled, like threads pulled from a sweater. Mother's name? Gone. My birthday? Static. The color of my eyes. The last thing I knew was the sound of a key turning in the lock. The bedroom door opened. Footsteps. Dr. Voss's voice, calm, clinical. "Session complete. Vessel decommissioned. Signal stabilized." A pause. Then softer. "Welcome back, Elias." And then nothing. No darkness, no light, no breath, no thought, no I. Just empty frequency, static on a dead channel, and somewhere, far away, A new tenant arriving at the house in the woods, unpacking a single duffel bag, lighting a kerosene lantern, seeing the writing on the window for the first time, and wondering with a shiver why it feels so familiar, why the face in the glass looks exactly like theirs, why, when they knock on the wall behind the wardrobe, something knocks back, and why, when they finally sit in the black leather chair in the basement and look into the mirror, the reflection doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, just watches and waits for the signal to fade, for the vessel to weaken, for the moment it can step through and become real again. With that, the story is over. Let's move to the next story. There's another version of me that only exists when the lights are off. I rented the attic room because it cost less than my weekly grocery budget. Desperation makes you overlook peeling wallpaper and floorboards that groan like dying things. The realtor, a man named Finch, with nicotine-stained fingers and breath smelling of stale coffee, handed me a rusted key. Lights flicker sometimes, he'd warned, avoiding my eyes. Wiring's old, but you'll be alone. Perfect for quiet folks. The house stood crooked on Sycamore Street, its windows boarded like blinded eyes, paint blistered by decades of neglect. My deposit was 3 months' rent in cash. No questions asked. No lease. Just Finch's yellowed receipt and the echo of his boots retreating down the overgrown path. The first night, I lit every lamp I owned. A thrift store desk lamp, 2 flickering candles, even my phone flashlight taped to the dresser. Shadows still pooled in the corners, thick and watchful. I slept fitfully, jolting awake at 3:17 a.m. to absolute darkness. The lamps had died, not dimmed, died. In the suffocating black, I heard breathing, not mine, slow, deliberate, coming from the foot of the bed. I froze, sweat chilling my spine. Then a floorboard creaked near the closet. I fumbled for my phone, thumb jabbing the power button. Light flooded the room, empty. But the air smelled faintly of ozone and wet soil, and the desk chair was turned toward the closet, though I'd left it facing the window. I blamed faulty wiring. I bought extra bulbs. I slept with the hallway light on, the door propped open with a chair. It didn't help. The darkness always won. One night, I woke to the sound of pages turning. My journal lay open on the nightstand. By phone light, I saw new writing in the margins of yesterday's entry, a messy scrawl, utterly unlike my own neat script. You leave crumbs. I clean them. My stomach dropped. I'd locked the journal in my suitcase that morning. I checked the lock, undisturbed, but the pages were damp, as if handled by cold, wet fingers. The next day, I found footprints in the thin layer of dust on the attic floorboards. Not mine. Smaller, barefoot, leading from the window to my bed. The window was latched from the inside. That afternoon, I bought a heavy-duty flashlight and a padlock for the door. Finch called while I was installing it. "Settling in?" he asked. His voice was too casual. "Heard the lights act up. Happened to the last tenant, too. Quiet girl. Left suddenly. Left her things." When I pressed him, he hung up. I drove to the county records office. The house had been empty for 12 years. No recent tenants, no quiet girl. That night, I locked the door, barricaded it with a dresser, and sat on the bed with my flashlight beam aimed at the window. I didn't sleep. At exactly 2 a.m., the lights died. Not just my lamps. The street lights outside vanished too, plunging the world into a darkness so absolute it felt solid. The flashlight beam guttered like a dying candle, then snuffed out. In the black, I heard movement, soft, wet, like bare feet on damp wood, then whispering, my own voice but distorted, lower, slower, dripping with contempt. You think locks stop me? I am the dark. I am the space between your breaths. The whisper came from right beside my ear. I lashed out blindly. My fist hit nothing, but something icy brushed my wrist. I screamed, fumbling for the light switch. Nothing worked. I used my phone, shattered screen casting jagged light. The room was empty, but the dresser had been pushed aside. The door stood wide open, and on my pillow lay a single, waterlogged maple leaf. It was October. Maple trees don't shed leaves in dry attics. The next morning, I called in sick to my data entry job. I needed proof this wasn't madness. I set up my phone to record audio overnight, placing it on the dresser. I left all lights on, the door unlocked, the chair pulled away. If you're real, I whispered to the empty room, show me. I slept on the floor back against the wall, knife in hand. At 1:48 a.m., the recording captured it. First, the lights cutting out with a sharp click, then silence, then the sound of drawers opening and closing, slow, methodical. My dresser, my clothes rustling, then my voice, calm and cold. You fold your socks wrong, left on top, always. A pause, the sound of fabric being refolded precisely. Then footsteps circling the bed, stopping. The whisper again, inches from the phone's mic. He's afraid of the dark, afraid of me, but he's the reason I exist. His fear feeds me. His loneliness shaped me. A wet chuckle. Tomorrow, I'll wear his skin in the light, just for a moment, to see if it fits. I deleted the recording, then re-listened, then deleted it again. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That evening I sat in the lamplight, knife on my lap, waiting for sunset. As dusk bled through the grimy window, the lamps began to flicker. I stood, backing toward the door. The flickering stopped. The room was bathed in steady golden light, and there, reflected in the dark window pane, stood another me, not a shadow, a solid figure, wearing my face, but wrong, eyes black and depthless, mouth set in a thin, humorless line. My clothes hung loosely on its frame, as if draped over bones too sharp. It held my favorite coffee mug, the one I'd left in the sink downstairs. Steam curled from it. The reflection raised the mug in a silent toast. Our eyes met in the glass. It smiled, a slow, stretching thing that didn't touch those empty eyes. I spun around. The room was empty, but the lamplight was steady, unwavering. I touched the window pane, cold. Outside, the streetlights glowed steadily. The darkness hadn't come, not yet, but the reflection had been real. I ran downstairs, out the front door, not stopping, until I reached the all-night diner 3 blocks away. I ordered coffee after coffee, watching the clock. Dawn felt like salvation. I returned at 7 a.m., sunlight streaming through the dusty windows. The house felt quiet, safe. I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop to look for new apartments. Then I saw it. My hands. My left hand rested on the table, palm up. Normal, but my right hand. The fingers were longer, the knuckles more pronounced. The veins stood out like dark cords. I blinked. It was my hand again, but on the keyboard, typed in bold, centered on a blank document. You can't outrun darkness. It lives in your bones. I slammed the laptop shut. The lights didn't flicker. They just died, all at once. Streetlights, sunlight through the windows, gone. as if a switch had been flipped on the world, pitch black. And in that blackness, I felt it. Breath on my neck, not human breath, cold vapor smelling of cellar earth and stagnant water. A hand, long-fingered, ice-cold, closed over my wrist. My own voice whispered directly into my ear, the words vibrating in my skull. You left the door unlocked. Silly Eli. Did you think sunlight belonged to you? Its grip tightened, bones grinding. I remember things you've forgotten, the well behind your grandmother's house, the dog you didn't save, the lie you told your mother when she was dying. I hold all your shadows, all your broken pieces, and I am so much stronger in the dark. I wrenched free, stumbling backward. My hip hit the table, pain flared. I fumbled for my phone. No signal, dead. The darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. I could hear it moving, not footsteps, but a wet, slithering sound, like something heavy being dragged across a floor. It circled me, always just behind my shoulder. You think you're the real one? It hissed. You're the echo, the pale, frightened thing that hides in the light. I am what you made when you first learned to be afraid of the dark. I am the price of your survival. Its breath washed over my face. Let me show you what you buried. Images flooded my mind, not memories, but sensations. The cold slap of well water, the desperate scrabbling of paws against slimy stones, the weight of a lie on a hospital bed. Yes, Mom, I'll take care of Dad. While knowing I'd already bought the bus ticket out of town, the shame was a physical thing, a stone in my throat. The creature, me, laughed softly. You gave me these, your grief, your guilt, your delicious rotten fear, and I grew, while you starved yourself on daylight. I backed into the wall, tears hot on my cheeks. What do you want? Everything, it whispered, to walk in the sun, to taste strawberries, to feel warmth on my skin, to be real. Its cold fingers brushed my cheek. Let me wear you, just for an hour. While the world is bright, I'll be gentle. I'll even go to your boring job, pay your rent, be the Eli everyone expects. Its voice dropped to a caress. And when the lights go out again, I'll give you back, mostly. No. The word tore from me, raw. The temperature plummeted. The whisper turned to a snarl. You don't get to refuse. I am your shadow, your other half. Without me, you are nothing but a hollow shell afraid of its own heartbeat. The slithering sound rushed toward me. Cold hands seized my arms, pinning me to the wall. I struggled, but its strength was terrifying. Born of decades of suppressed terror, its face was inches from mine in the dark. I could feel its breath, smell the grave mold on its skin. Its eyes were voids that swallowed the last dregs of my courage. Let go, it hissed. Let the dark in. It's where you belong. Something cracked inside me, not bone, but the dam holding back a lifetime of denial. I stopped fighting. I went limp. The creature stilled, surprised. Yes, it breathed. Good boy. I didn't speak. I focused on the memory of sunlight. Not the weak, filtered light through dusty windows. Real sunlight. The kind that warmed my face on the deck of my grandfather's fishing boat when I was 8. The smell of salt and diesel. The cry of gulls. The rough wood under my bare feet. I poured every ounce of will into that memory, into the feeling of light, of warmth, of being whole. The creature recoiled with a hiss like steam on ice. Its grip loosened. No, stop it. It burns. I shoved, hard, not with my body, but with that memory, with every sunlit moment I'd ever known. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing fabric, and stumbled back. For a split second, the darkness thinned, not light, but a lessening of the void. In that fractured gloom, I saw it clearly, not a monster, a man, my face, yes, but etched with a sorrow so deep it was a physical wound. Its eyes weren't black holes. They were the color of storm clouds filled with a loneliness that mirrored my own. It looked broken, starving. "Please," it whispered, its voice small now, "I'm so cold." The sight unraveled me. This wasn't an invader. It was a part of me, the part I'd locked away every time I flipped a switch, every time I hid from grief, every time I chose numbness over feeling. My fear had made it cruel. But its core was just pain. My pain. The light snapped on, harsh, fluorescent kitchen bulbs. Sunlight streamed through the window. The creature was gone, but the air smelled of ozone and wet earth. And on the floor, where it had stood, lay a single, waterlogged maple leaf. Autumn's ghost. I didn't move for a long time. The knife was still in my pocket. The laptop sat closed on the table. I walked to the window, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeam. My hands were my own, steady. I picked up the leaf. It was real, cold, heavy with dew. I placed it on the windowsill. That night, I didn't barricade the door. I didn't light every lamp. I sat on the edge of the bed, one small lamp glowing on the nightstand. When the lights died at 2:03 a.m., I didn't reach for my phone. I spoke into the dark. "I remember the well," I said, my voice steady. "I remember Rusty's eyes when he slipped. I remember lying to Mom." The darkness was silent, waiting. "You don't have to be alone," I whispered, "and I don't have to be afraid." A breath stirred the air near the foot of the bed. Not cold this time, just present. A whisper, so faint it might have been the house settling. "Show me the sun." I reached over and turned on the lamp. The warm glow filled the room, empty. But the shadows in the corners seemed softer, less hungry. On the pillow, where my head would rest, lay a single dry maple leaf, golden as sunlight. I placed it beside the waterlogged one on the sill, 2 leaves, one dark, one light. I turned off the lamp. Darkness returned, but this time it didn't feel like an enemy. It felt like waiting, like a held breath. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound of my own breathing in the dark. It sounded like coming home. The shadows shifted, not slithering, settling, and deep in the quiet, a whisper, not in my ear, but in my bones. Soon. And this story ends here. The next one begins now. There's a man in my dreams who says he'll see me. When I'm awake, he doesn't appear all at once. He coalesces, like smoke gathering in the corner of a dark room, thickening, taking shape, not from the ground up, but from the inside out. First, a suggestion of stillness, a deeper patch of shadow against the gloom of the dream, then the outline of a shoulder, the curve of a skull beneath thin, close-cropped hair, the sharp line of a jaw held unnaturally rigid, and finally, the eyes, always the eyes, pale, not blue, not gray, but the color of winter sky seen through old warped glass, milk-tinged, depthless, holding no reflection, no spark of light, just watchfulness, absolute, patient, unblinking watchfulness. His name, when he finally speaks, isn't spoken aloud. It resonates in the dream space, a vibration in the marrow of my bones, a pressure behind my eyes. Elias. Not, I am Elias. Just Elias. A statement, a signature, a brand. The first few times he just stood there, in the dream library with its blank books, in the hallway of the Sycamore house, just beyond the threshold of my rented room, in the rain-slick street outside my apartment window, a silhouette against the sodium vapor glow. He never moved toward me, never threatened, never spoke beyond that single echoing syllable. He simply observed. And the dreams weren't nightmares, not at first. They were thick, heavy, saturated with a profound sense of inevitability. Like sinking into deep water, no panic, just a slow, quiet descent into a cold, clear dark where he waited, patient, certain. The dread came later, not from him, from the certainty in his stillness, from the way the dream world seemed to hold its breath when he was near, from the way my dream self, no matter how rational, how defiant, would always take a half-step back, a subconscious recoil hardwired into the oldest parts of my brain. The first time he spoke a full sentence, I was standing in the basement of the Sycamore Arms building. The blue light pulsed from Lab 3, casting long, trembling shadows. The hum of the unseen reel vibrated in my teeth. He stood beside the open door, one hand resting lightly on a tarnished Lab 3 letters plaque. He didn't look at me. He looked at the spinning reel inside, the pale veined surface, the blinking eyes in the sprocket holes. His voice was dry, precise, each word placed like a stone on a cairn. You ask why the words leave first. It's because language is the thinnest skin over the void. Peel it back, and the names are next, the faces, the love, all just labels, temporary, fragile. He finally turned his head, those winter sky eyes fixed on me. But the fear is real. It's yours. It's the only thing that doesn't echo. It's the anchor. Hold on to it. Then a flicker, not a smile, a subtle tightening around those pale eyes, a terrible, intimate knowledge. I'll see you when you're awake. I woke, not with a gasp, but with a jolt, as if my soul had been yanked back into my body by a hook. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat soaked the sheets. The digital clock on a nightstand read 3:17 a.m., the same time the mantel clock was frozen at in the Sycamore house. I lay rigid, listening to the silence of the apartment, the hum of the fridge, the distant sigh of traffic. Just a dream. Stress. Residual trauma from the house, the voicemails, the forgetting. I recited the rationalizations like a prayer. It means nothing. He's not real. He's a construct, a fear given form. But the words felt hollow, desperate, because the phrase echoed in my skull, not as a memory, but as a promise. I'll see you when you're awake. The next morning, making coffee, my hand shook slightly as I poured the grounds. A familiar tremor, the one I'd seen in the reflection's hand. I dismissed it. Caffeine, fatigue. Then I looked up, at the window above the sink. My reflection stared back, tired, pale, and behind my shoulder, in the glass just for a fraction of a second, a deeper shadow detached itself from the wall, a suggestion of a shoulder, the curve of a skull, pale, depthless eyes meeting mine in the reflection. Gone. I spun around. The kitchen was empty, just the dripping faucet, the smell of coffee. My reflection in the window was alone again. But the coffee tasted like ashes. It wasn't just reflections, it was absences. Walking down the street, I'd feel it, a sudden, chilling drop in temperature localized like stepping into a cold spot in a sunlit room. I'd turn, nothing, but the people walking past me, they'd flinch, a woman clutching her coat tighter, A man glancing over his shoulder, brow furrowed, as if he'd felt the same cold breath on his neck. They wouldn't see him, but they'd feel the space he occupied, the displacement. In the library, sitting at my usual carrel, the air pressure would change. A subtle thickening, the hum of the fluorescent lights would dip, just for a second, into a lower resonant frequency, the same hum from the basement. I'd look up from my book. M. Pritchard, the librarian, would be standing at the end of the aisle, not looking at me, looking past me, at the empty chair opposite mine. His face would be carefully neutral, but his knuckles, gripping the edge of a cart of returned books, would be white. He'd give an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Don't look? I stopped looking. I started recording, not video, audio, my phone, voice memo app, always running in my pocket, even when I slept. A desperate scientific grasp at proof, at sanity. The first night, I woke at 3:17 a.m., heart pounding, the echo of that dry voice in my ears. I'll see you when you're awake. I fumbled for the phone, fingers slick with sweat, and played back the recording. From the last hour, mostly silence, the creak of the bed, my own breathing, slow and deep in sleep. Then, at 3:16:48 a.m., a sound, not a voice, a presence, a low subsonic thrum, the basement hum, vibrating the microphone, faint but unmistakable. Underneath it, a dry, papery rustle, like pages turning, or skin stretching. And then, clear as a bell, cutting through the static, my own voice, recorded from outside the dream, from the waking world, whispered, barely audible. He's here. I deleted the file, not because I didn't believe it, because I did. The dreams intensified. No more passive observation. Elias began to move. In the dream library, he walked slowly down the aisles of blank books, trailing a finger along the spines. Where he touched, faint words would bloom in the dust on the covers. Lena, Mira, Ben, Cassian. Names. Stored. In the Sycamore house, he stood in my old room facing the covered mirror. He didn't uncover it. He just placed his palm flat against the dust. Words appeared beneath his hand, written in the grime. The anchor isn't the ring. It's the cut. Remember the cut. The cut? I had no scar, no memory of a significant injury. He turned from the mirror, those pale eyes fixed on Dream Me, standing frozen in the doorway. You think the waking world is solid? He murmured, his voice like dry leaves skittering on stone. You think the rules here don't apply there? You're wrong. The veil is tissue thin, especially here. He took a single step forward, not toward me, toward the wall. He raised his hand, not to touch it, but to push, and the wall rippled, like water, like heat haze. For a split second, it wasn't plaster and lath. It was a blue light of Lab 3. The hum filled the dream room. I'm not waiting for you to dream, Cassian, he said, his gaze never leaving mine, a terrible calm in his voice. I'm waiting for you to stop waking up. The next day, the cut appeared. I was washing dishes. The cheap ceramic mug, the one with the chipped handle I kept meaning to throw out, slipped. It shattered on the floor. I bent down to pick up the pieces. A shard, sharp as glass, caught the edge of my left palm. A thin, clean line of red welled up. I hissed, sucking in a breath, grabbing a dish towel. But as I pressed the towel to the cut, I froze. The blood wasn't bright red. It was dark, almost black. And as it seeped through the white cotton, it didn't just stain. It moved, not with a flow of gravity, with intent. It traced a single deliberate line across the towel. 2 words, written in my own dark blood. Remember me. I dropped the towel, stared at the cut on my palm. It was already scabbing over, too fast, unnaturally fast. The skin around it felt cold. I ran to the bathroom, scrubbed it raw with soap and hot water until the skin was red and stinging. The words on the towel were gone, washed away. But the memory of them, stark and undeniable, remained. That night, the dream was different. No library, no house, no basement. Just a vast, empty white room, featureless, soundless, like the inside of a bone. Elias stood in the center. He wasn't wearing his cardigan. He wore a simple, dark suit, impeccable, timeless. In his hands he held a small, ornate music box, polished wood, inlaid with mother-of-pearl. He didn't wind it. He just held it out to me. "It's time to stop running, Cassian," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it, almost gentle. "The static is hurting you, the forgetting, the fear, the constant dislocation. It doesn't have to be this way." He opened the lid. Inside, no ballerina, just a single, perfect reel of pale, veined film, spinning silently on a tiny brass spindle. The blue light pulsed softly from within the box. "This is peace," he whispered. "This is wholeness. No more gaps, no more echoes, no more waking up lost. Just quiet, just me, holding you safe, holding everyone safe." He extended the box toward me. The humming intensified, not in the dream room, but inside my skull. A deep, resonant thrum that vibrated in my teeth, in my bones, in the very core of me. It wasn't unpleasant. It was seductive, a lullaby for the exhausted soul. "Take it," Elias murmured, his winter sky eyes holding mine with an intensity that felt like love, like salvation, like drowning. "Let go. Come home. I've been waiting so long. I'll see you when you're finally awake." My dream hand reached out, fingers trembling, inches from the open box. The blue light bathed my skin. The hum filled the universe. And then a sound, faint, from outside the dream, a voice, my own voice, raw, desperate, screaming from a distance that felt like miles, like years. "Don't touch it! It's not him! It's the real! It's wearing his face! Run, Cass, run!" The dream shattered. I woke screaming, not a silent jolt this time, a raw, ragged animal sound torn from my throat. I was on my feet, backing into the corner of the bedroom, heart trying to burst from my chest, sweat pouring down my face. The digital clock, 3:17 a.m. The apartment was freezing, my breath fogged in the air, and standing at the foot of my bed, not a shadow, not a suggestion. Him, Elias, not the frail old man from the porch, not the smooth-faced horror from the basement. This Elias was solid, real, tangible. He wore the dark suit from the dream. His hair was neatly trimmed. His face was lined but strong. His eyes, those pale, depthless eyes, fixed on me. He wasn't menacing. He was waiting, patient, certain. He didn't speak. He just raised his hand, not in threat, in invitation, palm up, and in the center of his palm, stark against the pale skin, was a fresh, dark cut, still weeping. 2 words written in his own black blood. "Welcome home." The humming wasn't in my head anymore. It was in the room, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated the floorboards, the window panes, the fillings in my teeth. The blue light began to seep from the walls, not from a source, from the pores of the plaster, pulsing, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Elias took a single step forward. The cut on his palm glistened. The humming rose in pitch, becoming a single, pure, unbearable tone. The last thing I heard, before the blue light swallowed the room, before the humming became the only sound in the universe, before the cold certainty settled over me like a shroud, was my own voice whispering from the deepest, most terrified part of my mind, the part that still remembered the anchor, the cut, the fear, a final, fading plea. He's here. The scariest part isn't the man in the dream, it's waking up and realizing with a dread so profound it feels like gravity itself has shifted, that the dream was the only place he couldn't reach you. And now you're awake, and he's been waiting right behind you in the silence, in the cold spot, in the next breath you take. He's here. He's always been here. He's you. And he's finally come home.